I think we're ready, David.
All
Let's
right.
do it.
Good afternoon, everybody. There we go. Let's see, we have a couple organizational updates and employee recognition. I'm going to start by calling on Council Member Carlos Flores, and he's going to make a couple presentations. Carlos.
This is a good podium, right, staff? I think it is. Okay. All right. It's a little unusual being on this side, but good afternoon, everybody. Thank you, City Manager David Cook, for the introduction. I'm here today in front of you to present something that I think is very noteworthy, especially now that we're observing Law Enforcement Week. Our city marshals, every day, they greet us with a smile, maybe a nice pithy remark and a joke. And that means a lot, to us, because they take pride in their jobs, they keep us safe, they're the front face to the public who comes sees us at every council meeting. So they serve a terrific purpose, aside from their daily grind, aside from doing their duties or scheduled things that they are responsible for, they do so much more. So I think it's appropriate to recognize them. And I'd like to call on City Marshal Swift to come up, please. Now I'm going to read briefly here a proclamation signed by the mayor and members of the city council to recognize the marshals. So we can hold that for me, sir. Yes, thank you. Okay. And it reads, the Fort Worth Marshals Division is the enforcement arm of the Fort Worth Municipal Court. The Marshals Division has served the city of Fort Worth since 1873. The Marshals Division was deactivated, then reactivated in 1983. Currently, there are 45 deputy marshals that form one of the largest divisions in Texas. And whereas Fort Worth Marshals apprehend fugitives from justice, execute criminal processes, protect the municipal judiciary and staff, operate a patrol program at Lake Worth, and provide support for many other community outreach programs, including warrant forgiveness. The marshals are at the forefront of less invasive warrant compliance techniques and designed to mitigate unintended negative outcomes to defendants. And whereas the Fort Worth Marshals are tasked with securing City Hall and providing security for City Council and various other public meetings. The marshals screen over 375,000 persons annually, using the latest security techniques and devices to maintain safety and security. And whereas Fort Worth Marshals are committed to hiring and maintaining a diverse workforce that is reflective of the communities in Fort Worth, the Marshals will continue to find creative and innovative methods to build long-lasting community relationships and partnerships, while providing a high level of customer service in all citizen encounters. And whereas the City of Fort Worth employees and residents appreciate the Marshals Division's work, who execute their duties with professionalism every day. Now, therefore, the City of Fort Worth does hereby recognize and proclaim May 16th through the 20th, 22, as Marshals Appreciation Week.
Thank you. I appreciate that, City Council member. And on behalf of the Marshals Division, I just want to say thank you to the mayor, to City Council, to the City Manager's office, and everyone else who helps us and supports us in our daily duties and activities. We really have a great bunch of officers that work for us here that come to work every day excited to do their jobs and to be of service to this community. So we appreciate you taking the opportunity to provide us with this proclamation. Thank you very much.
I think Gina had something to say too.
You
please.
can't leave.
Is there anybody else that wants to come and join us?
Please.
We're a little lonely.
All the marshals. All the marshals.
Mayor, would you like to join us?
Sure.
There we go.
No, you're good. Get in there. I'll get in here.
need to do Pano. All right.
Thanks, everybody.
But you can't leave yet.
Yes, not entirely.
I just wanted to say a special thank you because what people may not realize is the marshals have maintained order in the council chamber. And even though some very interesting things have happened in the chamber, the decorum of that chamber much depends on you all being alert, and I appreciate that. I also recall when I first came on the council, you all made sure there were no accidents occurring in the parking lot because we have had an incident of tampering with a vehicle. And so it does not escape me how important your role is. And so I just wanted to say thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Councilwoman, I appreciate that.
Okay, now we're going to move on to another recognition involving two former marshals who are now retired and members of the Fort Worth Marshals Association. And we have certificates of recognition for former Marshal Leland Weber and former Marshal Mario Guevara. If they could come up, please. And while you stand there, I'm going to read some embarrassing information. No, I'm just kidding. Some information that someone else gave me to read about you that I think is noteworthy, okay? Leland Weber, he started his law enforcement career in November 1986 with the Denton Police Department. Retired in 2017. His accomplishments included Police Academy Top Firearms Award, Crime Prevention Specialist, DARE Officer, IPMBA, Police Cyclist, Denton Cops Program, and Hostage Crisis Negotiator. 3 days later, he joined the Fort Worth Marshal's office and completed 5 more law enforcement years of service. So thank you for your service, Mr. Leland. And Mario Guevara, he started his law enforcement career in 1985 with the Texas Game Warden Office and retired in 2005. His accomplishments included 3 life-saving awards with numerous commendations for working with the homeless, Big Brother program, worked with small communities and rural areas in different capacities in the past of the stage, donating food for the less fortunate, and through TPWD, kids fish events and water safety events, donating safety equipment. He joined the Fort Worth Marshal's office and completed 14 more law enforcement years. So thank you both for that commitment of service and for doing your jobs very well. Let me present these to you. All right. Okay. Ready for a picture? All right. Got it. Thanks again. Okay. I don't know if you wanted to say anything. You use your opportunity now. Going.
I know.
You want to say something? Go ahead, sir.
Just real quick, my name is Jesse Flores. I have the honor and privilege to be the president of the Fort Worth Marshals Association. And this is the part that I enjoy being in this position, is to recognize our members for their hard work and dedication to the city, serving our good citizens out there. And today, Vice President Mike Taylor has 2 small gifts. And it's not enough, but it's appreciation for each of our members if they want to show city council and the city management what you got. You can open it.
Oh.
Oh, it's a pocket knife.
This pocket knife has our association symbol on it, so
Awesome.
something for them to take. Don't cut yourselves, please. And a special
think
thank
they're
you
allowed to have
for
one.
the wives for putting up with your man right here. We appreciate it, but we wish you the best. Good luck, and this is not goodbye. This is always going to be your home. When you come and visit, give us a shout, okay? Thank y'all very much, Mayor.
Thank you for your service.
Thanks, guys. I'm gonna have to conduct an investigation, find out how those knives got through the metal detectors. But, yeah, yeah. Okay, next up, I'm gonna call on Richard Zavala to make an introduction. Richard?
Good afternoon, Mayor, members of the council. Richard Zavala, Park and Recreation Department. I'm going to stay in the in trouble podium because I'm always on this one. But it's my pleasure to introduce to you Joel McElhaney. Joel has been with the city for 17 years. Most recently served as the development director for the department. And in that role, he has done over $144 million worth of projects. He's also enabled the city to receive $22 million worth of grants, both at state, COG, and TxDOT level. It's always good to see when one of your folks grow within. He went through Leadership Fort Worth. He's also been part of the city manager's executive development program. He's gone down to TEACS for training. He's done everything that we've asked him to do to prepare him for this. He was the architect of our 2014, 2018, and most recently our 2022 bond program, $124 million, the highest in the history of the park system. Joel has a landscape architect degree from Iowa State University, a master's degree in public administration from the University of Texas at Arlington. He's a licensed landscape architect. He was one of 73 people that applied nationally for this position. So it's always good to see when somebody works hard, is committed, be able to reach this pinnacle. He will be overseeing our planning and resource management division, which includes capital and planning, but also our forestry trades, including our trades infrastructure and small capital projects. He lives in Arlington Heights with his wife, Anna, and his 2 kids. He loves to ride bikes. And I can tell you, this is the James Brown of the department. He's the hardest working man in town. And he truly takes that spirit of when I take a man's money, I ride for the brand. He's committed to the organization. So let's all put our hands together for Joel.
Thank you very much, and I greatly appreciate this opportunity, so we'll get to work.
Thank you, Joel. Gina, go ahead.
Joel, don't you dare leave. I was sitting here frantic because I thought Richard was going to announce you were going somewhere. And so I'm getting back to the podium. I want you all to know that years ago, during the school desegregation case, the city handed over Bunch Park to Fort Worth ISD. And when I came on board, I didn't know that, but I knew I had this desolate park, looked like a Vietnam War site in my district. And we were able to work out a plan to get the park back from the school district, and it was Joel who led the community engagement part that got that park back up and running. And so I'm so happy for you, but I was looking at you, I was like, oh no, I hope he's not leaving. And so congratulations, and I'm so very happy for you and Richard as well.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, thank you.
Thank you, Joel. Don't go far. Next up, I'm going to call on Dana Bergdorf to say a little something about the event we had on May 7th, which was the bond program vote and the charter amendment election. And she's going to recognize a number of people that played a part in that. Dana.
Thank you, David. First, let me start off by saying thank you, Mayor Pro Tem, and members of the City Council for helping us get the word out about the election on May 7th, for attending all the meetings this past summer, this spring, just getting the word out, helping us to prioritize projects, make sure that we had the right projects on the list, helping us expand the amount of the bond program from $500 to $560 million, and just for your support along the way. Obviously, big thanks to a lot of our external partners, Tarrant County, the Chambers, Real Estate Council, Trust for Public Land. There's a lot of different entities out there who are helping us with a number of different communication, information, education efforts along the way. But what I'd really like to do is thank city staff. So a lot of hours have been put in over the last few years, really since the last bond election in May of 2018, to gather information, to prioritize projects, meet with community groups, put together the lists, come up with cost estimates, educate go back to the drawing board when Mayor Pro Tem Bivens said, wait a minute. No, teasing. But helping us really come up with a great program that we could all be proud of. And so what I'd like to do is just walk through, and thank you to Michelle Goop for helping to put this together. So for Proposition A, is there anybody in the room who was involved with Proposition A? This was transportation, this was mobility. If you're in the room, please stand and be recognized. I know we've got a lot of folks on the list. Come on, William, I see you. So thank you for being here. Thank you for your support. All right, Proposition B, parks, recreation centers, community centers. There we go. Neighborhood Services, I know, was also involved in putting some of this together, but thank you guys for being here, and thank you to your team for all the work. Oh, there we go, Proposition B. All right. Next, Proposition C, libraries. All right, yes, thank you. Thank you, there you go. Proposition D, public safety, police, fire. Come on up. Thank you for your efforts. And then lastly, I don't know if we have anyone here in the room, but open space. So this was a new proposition, something we were a little nervous about, but really happy to see that pass on May 7th. So thank you all who are involved with that. Big thanks really to David and Mayor and Council for expressing support for this new idea. So thank you very much. And then lastly, our education and outreach team for scheduling all the meetings and adding meetings and getting the word out and video recording. And so thank you to the education folks. If you'll please stand. So special thank you to Roger Venables. I don't know if Roger is here, but Roger, is he? Oh, there he is. Yes, please stand, Roger. Roger. So Roger was the smooth talking, very calm, right? Could sell pretty much anything. So thank you, Roger, for not just the time at the public meetings, but also the behind the scenes work, getting all the departments together, helping them cuss and discuss how these projects would be laid out. Then also Steve Cook, our property management director, and Joel McElhaney, our new park and recreation assistant director, for their work in leading those discussions and handling the tough questions at the bond meetings. So again, thank you all very much. So we'll say thank you for that. And then while I'm up here, if I could take the privilege of recognizing Dennis McElroy and Leanne Guzman for their efforts on the propositions F through R. Yes, thank you for all the charter amendment and all the explanations that you guys did at those public meetings. Thank you very much.
I just have a comment on the bond. Now that it's passed, let's get those projects going and done. All right, let's spend the money.
Got it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dana.
Thank you, Dana.
I mentioned to Roger that he could take June and July off, and then in August, he has to start on the 2026 bond program. While we're implementing the 2022. There you go. All right. Next up, we have a few informal reports. The first one is on Alleyway Maintenance Program, and Victor Turner is available if there are any questions. Moving on. No. Oh, not yet. Victor. Where'd Victor? Alleyway Maintenance.
I did have a couple of questions, but if you can just give I do have it in front of us, but can you give us like a brief update of what your report consists of?
Sure. Mayor, Council, this report is giving an update on the number of alleyways that we maintain. Also, it speaks to where we had a budget shortfall and we moved.
Ways where we've got people setting up camps quite literally in the backyard of our homeowners. And so mowing them is great, but I'd like to see some more permanent investment in our alleyways, whether that's putting rock over them to make it more difficult, less comfortable for people to live in them, more cameras, whether it be through your department, police department, because they're becoming overgrown and unsafe.
Point taken.
Victor, I have a question for you. It's twofold. The workers who do the actual mowing, are those your employees or code compliance or parks?
No, ma'am, we contract that out.
Okay. Too often when people call for street repairs, any type of maintenance, but especially the area of streets and alleys in this case, the citizen is told, you're not on the rotation yet. I'd like for you guys to look into how citizens can report problems in alleys so that their concern can be addressed before it gets to their rotation, because I'm hearing from people in my district, I have very few alleys, but what I hear is that they're told, well, it's not my turn yet. But how do we let the citizen have a say in when these are mowed?
Yeah, they can actually report it through My Fort Worth app. That was one of the things that we transitioned to, or they can call our office as well.
I think what's happening is when they report it to the app, they're still told they're not in rotation. And so that becomes the concern that I have. How do we break the mold so that the citizen complaint really can be addressed then and not be just given the rule? And that's not a complaint, that's just what's happening. But we do have to be able to let them think they can call their city and have some action as opposed to being referred to the rules.
Yeah, we're looking at correcting that.
Okay, thank you.
I have a couple questions. Outside of this program here, is there another way the alleys are being cut?
Not to my knowledge.
Okay, so let me ask this question. I have, in Morningside, which is Morningside Hillside, historical South Side, is where a lot of majority of alleys are, and that's where most of our senior citizens live. And so we have some seniors that are paying their lawn man to cut the alley for the safety. Do we have a program for the city that they can submit those receipts that the city pays for them cutting the alleys?
No, sir.
Okay, I think that's something that we need to look into because alleyways brings animals, snakes, and all kind of things. And if getting around to certain areas once a year is not good enough, and so I challenge whichever department this is and the city council to do something fast on this, because if they can pay somebody to cut the alley instead of waiting for 3 or 4 months and submit their receipts to the city of Fort Worth, I think that can save us time. Also, I had a question, 'cause I did see an article that talked about high grass. And so do we know what the height of the grass where people start getting violations?
That would be referred to code compliance. Our department doesn't monitor that.
Okay. Well, I asked for a future agenda item on that, but my issue with us sending out violations on high grass and our alleys are as tall as me. That's crazy. And so so I think maybe your department and the code compliance department need to kind of work together where we're not putting out one message and doing something completely different. And so I think we need to get these alleys cut robustly. And so maybe just all around where our alleys are, do a super cut. So as the summer hits, a super cut is a pretty hot word, as the summer hits, so that we can take care of this issue and so it won't get worse. Thank you.
Let me just add, I know that Gina and Carlos probably can remember this. This conversation comes up every year and oftentimes in the budget. So I think there are maybe some small things we could do in the summer, which I know is a concern. But if the council really wants to commit to prioritizing alleyway maintenance, it's a significant budget decision. And I know that David and his staff and multiple departments that work on this, I just want us to acknowledge this is expensive to take care of, and we need to be cognizant of that.
Mayor, let me bring up another, and we'll come back, I think, with more information. There are alleyways that we own, so it is our responsibility to do it. We don't own a lot of alleyways, and that is private property. So some of the alleyways that we're talking about might not be our responsibility. So the question is also then going to be, are we going to assume responsibility for the maintenance of private property? Different question.
If it's private property, are they required to
Yes.
maintain that alleyway?
Yes.
So can they put a fence to the middle of that alleyway and make it their backyard?
I don't know about that part.
mean-
Yeah.
In past years.
Which one is it?
Well, in past years, the city of Fort Worth, and maybe legal or somebody might remember this, sometime back, the city did offer residents an opportunity to purchase, their alleyways. I maintain
Okay.
mine just because I do, right? Not all people can, and I get that also, especially the elderly. So there is that problem with that. I don't know to what extent alleyways are rights of way or there are utility easements there. There's also
Usually
that.
utility easements.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
But I like Elizabeth's idea of putting rocks in, and I know that would have to be in coordination. We did that with a culvert in District 5 because prostitutes were working in that culvert. And so now it's loaded with stones and boulders and rocks. And so that's an idea that I like. It depends on how it interferes with, utility access.
Theory, it should allow the vehicles to move down that road because it would be a hard enough substance. But I think over time, if we talk about from a budget perspective, because Mayor's completely correct, it would be astronomical to maintain all of those. But if we picked so many blocks or linear feet of alleys every year to put rock down, and we start with those that we know are kind of these homeless are creating these issues with homelessness, then what do we save in what we're spending to mow those alleys? Rock's not cheap, but over a 10-year period, I bet
We can get a
save
deal.
money.
And some people may not even be aware that the alley maintenance is their responsibility, and that's a reality.
maybe we can look at, again, offering to those that are able and willing to assume it. But I think you have to have more than 50% folks on the same block. It just can't be individual, property owners buying. It has to be pretty much all or nothing. So there is that barrier as well.
Yeah, I have a lot of people in my district that is willing to purchase that alleyway. And so I think that's, if we go back, like the mayor says, and do a holistic approach of if they can purchase, if we can stone them, if we can bring lighting, or if we're going to continue to mow and put it in the budget, see what that process look like. I'll be interested in that.
Okay.
Here's another thing that I've seen done before in alleyways. Stone could be cost prohibitive, but if you use something like refuse asphalt, I've seen that done before.
All right. I'd expect conversation on that in the budget. That's coming. Next IR is amending the tree fund policy to support an urban forestry master plan. And Daniel Leal is available if there are any questions. All right. The next informal report is on the results of the credit ratings on bonds with the 2022 debt financing plan. And Reggie Zeno is available if there are any questions.
Out of
I think it
respect
makes
to
sense.
Carrie, yes,
Yeah.
we need to have it.
Have him just talk about it a little bit.
Reggie, get up there.
Mayor and Council, the city entered into arrangements with 3 rating agencies to rate the bonds for, the issuance of bonds for both the general obligation and water sewer bonds in '22. This year, the city engaged Kroll, Fitch, and Moody's. Each of those agencies affirmed the current rating for the city, which was very positive. But in addition, Kroll actually increased or raised the financial outlook for the city from stable to positive. And that result was primarily due to the city's strong financial management as well as strong financial flexibility with the building of the fund balance over the years. Just a very, very strong tax position that the city is in currently. Additionally, the rating agencies also affirmed the rating for the water and sewer operation at the current level. So a really positive time frame that the rating agencies came back with those positive results. But ultimately, it speaks to the city's very strong financial position at this point in time. We're actually this morning sold the Geo Bonds. The results haven't been finalized as of yet, but again, fairly decent performance in a pretty rocky market at the present time. And then next week on the 24th, we'll be selling the water and sewer bonds.
Thank you, Reggie. Any questions, council? Thank you.
Thank you, Reggie.
Yes, sir.
Let's see. The next informal report is the monthly development activity report, and DJ Harrell is available if there are any questions.
I don't have any questions for DJ, but I just want to say thanks for this supplemental that he sent on the process improvements and that they're continue to work with the industry and DAC and everybody else. I see those and I'm thankful for it.
Thank you. And then finally, the last IR is on pool heating and the associated costs, maintenance, and staffing. And Richard Zavala is available if there are any questions. And Richard is working his way to the podium.
Mr. Barnes and Mr. Carter threw my paperwork on the floor. I'll be happy to answer questions. I'll summarize it for you. We had done some data research on heating outdoor pools when we were re-looking at the design and size of the Forest Park pool. We confirmed that it's not an industry standard. It's usually from a competition standpoint. It's not lap swim. Universities might do it. For municipalities, Learn to Swim, and the types of programs we offer, those are indoor type of facilities. We also knew that it was going to be a higher capital cost to install the heating system, and more so the operational cost, because it's pretty expensive at over $100,000 a year just to keep the pool at 80 degrees outside. Beyond that, we are a non-ozone attainment area, so that adds some complexity to it. So what you approved in the bond program was initially a $7.5 million pool to a $12 million pool, which included the 50-meter lap lanes and the play elements, which is consistent with what is there now and is not heated. You asked us to do a little bit more data research. We did that, and we actually modeled what the operating would look like over the wintertime when we would normally be closed. And so basically what we would do is adjust our subsidy of that pool that runs 3 months out of the season at about $135,000, $150,000 to just right at $400,000. And that would be an ongoing cost. So we also had long discussions with the aquatics consultant that is part of the design, Councilman Hunsaker. They confirmed that it's not an industry standard for outdoor pools. It's usually the indoor pools that are heated like that. So because it's not industry standard, because the use would drop significantly because of the cost, and because of the marginal use that we would have, we're not recommending adjusting the scope of the project. So I'll be glad to answer any questions.
Thanks for that, Richard. Obviously, this has been a very passionate project for a lot of the community members, and they've contacted me, and I know other offices too as part of this. So I thank you for this IR and putting it on paper. I understand the increased costs. I think this is in light of that we've closed almost all the pools except one over the course of the last number of years. So this is making it even more sensitive for some people. A question I did have running some of these numbers. First of all, a question, it's about 70 days a year, I guess, June 11th to August 14th, 70, 75 days that the pools are actually open. Is that right?
Yes, we're open weekends beginning Memorial Day weekend until Fort Worth ISD stops classes. Then we're open 6 days a week until school starts again, and then weekends till Labor Day.
Okay, so I want to understand some numbers. If you take the numbers you put in here of seasonal operation, 262, 828, and you divide that by 75, the number of days, it's roughly an operating cost of $3,500. If you take the off season, I'm getting to something, 458, 567 divided by the other 285 days, it's roughly about $1,600 to operate. What's the cost difference during off season and on season?
The basic difference would be the staffing. Our target is to hire 22 lifeguards during peak season when the pool is full most of the time, and then during the off season, the budget that we laid out was 2 guards and 2 part-time guards with some pool managers. So it's really based on staffing and the cost for the natural gas to heat the pool.
Okay. One thing I think I'm in agreement, this year-round might be impossible for us to get to at this point. I'd like to continue to maybe see how we look at extending the time. I mean, it's May 17th right now. We've had 90-plus days for the last, few weeks. So even maybe on the weekends before we get into prime school. I mean, I know this sort of mirrors when the community centers are open as well, mid-June to mid-August for daycare. But I also know there's families that scramble for a couple of weeks when the ISD gets out before we pick up that program. So it may be something I'd like you to look at, I'd like you to look at how we maybe get it open earlier in May or so and close later in September on the
Glad to
weekends
do
at
it. It's
least.
mainly going to be a staffing issue because a lot of the
Sure.
young people that we hire are either in college right now and we're waiting for them to come home.
Sure.
Or they're in school. So it's not inconsistent with any other municipal program across the country.
Yeah, no, I
Open
get that, and I
Memorial
understand
Day.
the staffing challenges. We're Fort Worth, Texas, though, and maybe we do things a little differently sometimes. So I'd like to at least think about how we look at that and how we explore that.
Give it some thought.
Councilman Williams has talked about safe spaces and other places. This is something also, too, that we could look at as well.
Very
Thanks.
good.
And Richard, I guess I want to tie in on that. During the discussions of changing the originally proposed size of Forest Park, there were people in that neighborhood who cited the poor people of Stop 6 had no idea what discussions were going on, and they felt like Stop 6 constituents did not know and needed to be included. That was totally untrue. Stop 6 residents were totally engaged, as you know. But to make provisions for the concerns of those good people, whatever you do for Forest Park in terms of studies, include Stop 6, so we don't have to hear from people thinking that we're not engaged, okay?
That's correct. And the report addresses both Forest Park
Thank
and
you.
the Stop 6 pool.
Thank you, Richard. Mayor, that concludes my report.
Thank you, David. I appreciate that. Council, our next item is questions regarding upcoming zoning cases on May 24th. Anything for staff? No? Any action items pertaining to May 24th? If not, we can move straight into the Fort Worth Stock Show and Rodeo 2022 Economic Impact Report with Matt Carter and Brad Barnes.
Just for the record, I grew up riding my bicycle down to the Forest Park pool, and it was round in those days. So well, good afternoon, Madam Mayor, council members, and staff. My name is Brad Barnes, and I'm President and General Manager of the legendary Fort Worth Stock Show and Rodeo. I'm here today to report on our 2022 show. We're submitting for each of you a special analysis report, which I believe was placed at each of your places there at the desk, that was conducted by Highland Market Research that provides pertinent data and information on our 22 show. In summary, it highlights an amazing year as we welcomed more than 1.2 million people onto the grounds for our 125th show. From our survey, we can tell you that 83% of the guests reside within the DFW metro area. 13% were from Texas outside the DFW metro area, and 4% were out of state and international. 63% reported being married. 53% reported being between the ages of 26 to 49. And it is estimated that these guests generated in excess of $115 million in direct expenditures. The promise of future growth is bright, tempered only by parking challenges and the weather. And some may say the weather is really called stock show weather. I don't know where they get that, but I have no control over that part. The stock show's mission is twofold. First is education. The stock show provides educational grants to Texas colleges and universities, as well as scholarships to Texas 4-H and FFA students. Since 1985, the stock show has awarded more than $100 million in contributions, educational grants scholarships, and auction proceeds benefiting the youth of Texas. Second is maintenance and improvement to the Will Rogers Memorial Center. As of March 31st, 2022, the stock show has spent more than $73 million, adjusted for inflation, on capital improvements at the Will Rogers Memorial Center, and gifted all those back to the city of Fort Worth for everybody to enjoy. This amount includes, but is not limited to, funding assistance for the construction of the Amon G. Carter Exhibit Hall, the Burnett Building, the Richardson Bass Building, and the Kit and Charlie Moncrief Building. The stock show has a long history of this public-private partnership with the city of Fort Worth, beginning back in 1908, when the stock show, along with Swift and Armour, were responsible for help building the Northside Coliseum. The Northside Coliseum was the stock show's original home until 1943, when we moved to the Will Rogers Memorial Center in 1944. As I mentioned, 2022 was an amazing year for the Fort Worth's largest and oldest public event. Livestock show entries totaled more than 29,000, of which approximately 10,000 were junior exhibitors, Texas 4-H and FFA students, representing 239 of Texas' 254 counties. Our open show exhibitors came from 43 states, Alberta, Canada, and Brazil. We hosted 14 livestock auctions with gross receipts totaling approximately $10 million. Out of the more than 600 professional rodeos each year across the country, we rank in the top 5 sanctioned by the Professional Rodeo Cowboys Association. Our FWSSR Pro Rodeo Tournament hosted the top 56 PRCA contestants in each event and paid out more than $1.2 million. The best contestants, coupled with the best livestock, equates to an outstanding competition. Rural media group's Cowboy Channel garnered the attention of millions of television viewers by broadcasting each performance. Cowboy Channel reporters and commentators conducted behind-the-chutes athlete interviews highlighting their outstanding rides and runs. The pre-show broadcast, shot from the open-air set in Dickey's Arena, North Concourse, was aired on TV and streamed in the arena, building fan excitement and anticipation. This tremendous exposure on the Cowboy Channel brought national and international attention to Fort Worth. The stock show has a long history of community engagement. Fort Worth-based Charity Foundation was the beneficiary of our Stock Show Goes Pink Day, supporting breast cancer survivors. Cook Children's Hospital Neonatal Intensive Care Unit was the beneficiary of our Cook Children's Day. Active and retired members of the military and their immediate families were provided free rodeo tickets on Military Appreciation Day, thanks to Fort Worth's Brumley family. And TCU Day and Dickey's Day gave guests opportunities to enjoy free grounds admission. Our growing auditorium concert series entertained thousands of fans in the amazing Will Rogers Auditorium, with performances from Clint Black, Jeff Foxworthy, Ryan Bingham, and the Fort Worth Symphony Orchestra. Our amazing high school mariachi competition returned for a second successful year in the comfortable venue with wonderful acoustics. This year, the stock show went Hollywood. Thanks to Taylor Sheridan, autograph signings and celebrity appearances generated tremendous excitement. Rip from Yellowstone and Ennis from 1883 turned out huge crowds in the Amon Carter Exhibit Hall and the Dickey's Arena Concourse. The Fort Worth Stock Show and Rodeo is proud of the public-private partnership that has been forged with the city of Fort Worth during the last 114 years. 1948 began the long history of capital improvements at the Will Rogers Memorial Center, when the stock show provided $1.5 million towards the construction of the 6 original cattle barns that we still use today. In 2015, the stock show, in partnership with the city, began a 4-phase renovation of these multi-purpose facilities in order that they may last an additional 70-plus years. We are currently working on plans for the 3rd phase of this ambitious project. In addition to these capital improvements, under our lease agreement, we also pay rent and all the maintenance and all the utilities and all the upkeep and overtime of city employees at the Will Rogers facility during our show. As a result of this partnership, one that's envied by cities across the nation, the Will Rogers Memorial Center hosts numerous events the other 11 months of the year. In fact, it is difficult to find an empty slot on the calendar. If one looks at the stock show plus the other events throughout the year, the estimated impact of the Will Rogers Memorial Center is estimated at $218 million in economic impact. Anchored by the Will Rogers Memorial Center and Dickies Arena, Fort Worth is now the epicenter of Western competition events in the United States. After 125 years, our commitment to the youth of Texas and the partnership with the city of Fort Worth is stronger than ever. The rising tide we're riding is taking us all to new heights and makes both the stock show and the city of Fort Worth truly legendary. Thank you very much, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Brad. Gina, go ahead.
Well, thank you for my additional boot jack. That meant a lot. Now, I have it in 2 locations. When I was in elementary school, we always had, well, back then we called it the Fat Stock Show. And those tickets came to us, I don't know how, but talk about the, I guess you'd say, free tickets you give away, or if they're not free, tickets that you give that people don't have to pay for entry. Who gets those?
So we work on, it originally was just Fort Worth ISD, and we're now working with all the contiguous counties around Tarrant County. And we provided over 500,000 free grounds admission tickets to school kids. And so those are distributed through our office through a system where we contact all the public school systems as well as homeschools and all the different various schooling systems out there. And they tell us how many they would like, and we send them to them.
I'm glad
free of charge.
Glad you're still doing that. The other thing that I wanted to mention to you is because of you, my cable bill is more expensive because I subscribe to the Cowboy Channel just to watch.
Need to talk to Patrick Gotch.
You know, but I'm real happy with the outcome. When I look at the participation and attendance regarding diversity, you know, we see 77% white or Caucasian, Black or African American 11%, Hispanic Latino 10%. I think there are persons on this council who can help you boost that attendance, and we won't charge you for it, but just being able to engage. I think you could get even greater excitement from us if we get a hat like the one that you're wearing. That would be good.
Mr. Carter will take care of that.
And that's in jest, but I really do know that this entire council would like to see the participation reflect the diversity of our community, and you've got a product that people can.
As we would as well, and we truly believe that the stock show is part of Fort Worth. It states who we are as a community, and we welcome everyone all the time. And of course, we have our Cowboys of Color rodeo and our Best of Mexico performance. But those are just certain days. We're 23 days long. We want everybody in the community there all 23 days.
Well, we can help you bring them here.
Careful what you wish for. I'll be there.
Thank you. And again, thanks for that.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Michael?
Yeah, as someone that grew up going to the rodeo, appreciate you taking this newbie at least on the other side and giving us a chance to ride out and do the other things that you did. I appreciate that and all the guidance and the way you keep their tradition. I think it's worth noting, if I did these numbers correctly, you're talking about the economic impact of the Fort Worth Stock Show and Rodeo is $115 million. Overall, with all the events, $217 million that come in there. But that's still 52% is the Stock Show and Rodeo, if I did those numbers correctly, the economic impact of that, which is just incredible. And you talked about the scholarships, and I know you said over $100 million, but this year alone, I think it was $6 million that was raised. I mean, that's pretty incredible, and that affects everybody. All those kids have raised those animals and other parts of it too. So thank you for that, and thank you for the good work you're doing.
Well, we appreciate all the support from council. It's very important. It's very important for, I think, the community to see the council members out there and engaged in the show. That's a very positive message and one we greatly appreciate.
Thank you.
Thanks, Brad. Carlos?
Brad, thanks a lot, for doing what you do, because getting such a show, planned and underway, especially right after COVID, no easy task. I know that involved a lot of hard work, a lot of worry, but y'all did it, and you did it well. It's certainly a great economic benefit to the city. I mean, looking at the, comparative analysis that you provided, it's very telling. And again, right after a pandemic, this is what you can do. This is what Fort Worth is able to do, when they put their hearts and minds together. To Gina's point about getting, more diverse participation and visitation, from our residents and our communities. I'm encouraged to see that the numbers are improving. It's beginning to happen. And really beyond Dickey's. The stockyards, as you both know, play a great role in that because there's a lot of programmed, events happening there in the Coliseum that can certainly benefit, support, and encourage more people to visit the entirety, of our Fort Worth Western culture. So that plays a big part. I'm going to make one observation when it comes to things involving mobility, okay? I know that when I came by to some of the events and, we were leaving, I noticed that a lot of Uber and Lyft drivers were double parking right there, taking up a lane, causing some traffic snarls, right? And I get it. People trying to get home, they call an Uber. Uber's like, well, I see all these crowds. They're trying to get in as close as they can, but that's causing, some headaches as far as traffic. I had talked to PD at that time and said maybe in the future, and I'm just putting a bug in your collective ears, maybe we can plan that better, have designated areas for Uber and Lyft, those kind of rideshare programs.
We've actually studied some designating an actual lot, parking lot to an Uber lot.
Good.
The trouble is it starts impacting our overall parking capacity. And
I
so,
get
it's a fine line to walk, but I think you've got a very valid point. And it's probably going to only increase over time, these ride share programs, so.
Sure.
I'll tell you, you'll see it in here in this survey. It's rather interesting. We asked this specific question: if there was a shuttle that was scheduled and on time and regularly scheduled from downtown or the north side direct to the stock show, would you ride it? 91% said no.
Doesn't surprise me.
Yeah, but we've even to your point, we've had several discussions with Craig Cavaliers. How do we make it, during stock show time, one event citywide, not just out there at Will Rogers, but truly citywide.
Exactly.
And part of that was we were discussing, was there a way to have mobility where people parked once, but then they could travel around via shuttle or something. And so we're going to have to rethink that a little bit.
Just more stuff to do prior to the next one.
Absolutely. Well, we can always be better. I promise you that.
Absolutely. Thank you both. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Jared, Leonard, Chris. Brad, you're not done. They're all going to talk.
Oh, okay.
It's a good thing.
Brad, first of all, I just want to say thank you for all the hard work that went into the Fort Worth Stock Show Rodeo. The evidence is in this booklet, and congratulations. Shamelessly, although I'm from Fort Worth, this year was my first rodeo and stock show, and I'm very shameful to say that. Me and my wife, I think, went to 22 out of the 23 days, and we absolutely loved it. So this certainly won't be our last one, and we'll bring a lot more folks with us. What is the activity called where the kids run out and they're trying to catch the little...
Calf scramble.
Yeah,
Calf scramble.
calf scramble. I want to help, bring some kids from Southwest Fort. I don't know what it entails to get them engaged, and I know they get a scholarship, and there's lots of kids in Southwest Fort Worth who are well deserving of a scholarship. I would love to be able to help in any kind of way to.
We'd be
make it
happy to,
happen.
we'd be happy to visit with you and see how we can help
Absolutely.
facilitate.
Would you like to get out there and do it yourself?
Absolutely, and I mean, this, yeah, I would love, again,
Actually, I think Jared and Chris should have to do mutton busting.
I would love to, I'll do that, sign me up.
We can sell more tickets.
Yeah, right. I think our cowboy heritage and, rancher heritage is something that's super important to expose all of our kiddos to. And I know kids that look like me oftentimes don't get exposed to that, especially where I come from. I'm not a stranger to the ranch land, but it was because of undergrad and not because of my K-12 experiences. So now I love tall grass. I wish I could have loved it much earlier on. So anyways, needless to say, I would love to get some kids from Southwest Fort Worth participating in that, to get them exposed to, the cowboy culture and also the potential scholarships.
Absolutely, and we can get them
Still have to
engaged
touch the
in
cap,
4-H and FFA programs.
Absolutely, and
Yeah.
I know Crowley ISD has one. I'd love to get them involved.
Yeah.
They have a beautiful CTE center. I would love to get y'all out there to see all the work that they're doing out there with
Tell
their.
them you went to Crowley ISD.
I
That's
went,
why you've never
yeah,
been to one.
I went to Crowley ISD,
so
and we
hopefully
didn't have tickets back in the
Okay.
day, so that's part of the reason. My parents were struggling grad students, and I couldn't afford it. But anyways, needless to say, I want to help get some kids from our side of town to the stock show next year.
Look forward to working with you.
Yes, sir.
Leonard, go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor. Brad, Matt, just want to congratulate you all on a great, certainly a great stock show and rodeo. And of course, mention Mr. Bass as well, and how thankful and grateful we are to him in all he does to help make it happen. So I thought that was important. And, a couple things that you mentioned, Brad, that I just thought I'd highlight. And, we've talked about it a little bit here, but, of course, we talk about history and tradition and consistency and the delivery of that product now generation after generation. But I wouldn't want people to think that it's just the same every year. And I think, when I say that, it's really a compliment and my desire to recognize you and Matt and Mr. Bass for constantly being innovative. And I've been around you all enough to know that, you never stop thinking, you never stop creating and thinking about, how does this get better? What kind of experience can this be? How can we do our outreach better? How can we bring more people in to experience this and deliver charitable dollars and affect the community in a better way? And I think that's remarkable because it is that need to be constantly better and see the opportunity to be constantly better, I think is extraordinary, and we're grateful for it. And I think we see it in the numbers. That kind of economic impact in 5 weeks for us is just tremendous. And so thank you for being innovative. Thank you for, creating that experience for all of us that gets better and better because of the ideas that you all implement and the passion that you have for that product is really extraordinary, and we're grateful for it. The second thing I wanted to just comment on very quickly, and Brad, you mentioned it as the equine capital, and that's no small point in my mind, because when we look at opportunities in Fort Worth, and I say this from a city perspective in what we can lean into, that what we can invest in, what we can manage better, what we can improve upon, we need to take care of the diamonds, right? And constantly look at making those brighter and brighter. And, when we look at alternative investments potentially, I think we just need to consider, fully how big could this be? And that's really maybe a request from me to you guys as better definition of what the equine capital means and where can we go beyond just the stockyard, from facilities to events. How do we really get there? You know, where is that goal line? What does it look like? I think I'd find that very useful, and you know, it'd be great conversation and debate because it might trigger a lot of other considerations.
Absolutely.
So those were just my two comments. But again, congratulations. Thank you both. Thank Mr. Bass on our behalf, and we'll look forward to next year.
Thank you very much. You know, I made a comment about Fort Worth is the envy of the Western culture, competitions, et cetera. And that is the truth. And I can promise you there's a lot of people that are riding hard to try to take that over. And it's something that we all hold very dear to, and we need to continue to do so. But we host people from Denver and Houston and San Antonio and everybody coming here to look at these facilities that we have. And the first question they always ask me is, how do y'all get this done? How do you do it? And my response is always, when we go downtown, we start with, let's do this, and not go downtown and pound your fist on the table and say, you need to come build this for me. And so that's really the approach that I think is Fort Worth. I mean, you know, that's.
I agree, and I think it's a great point because just as I was describing how you all produce the show year after year on Innovate, we can't rest on our laurels, right? So, and you could probably speak to this, but I know for a fact Denver is building a huge new equestrian and rodeo facility, right? And Oklahoma City competes in that space, and there's lots. But we can't rest. I think if we want to lean into things to continue to be the leader and you know, be on the forefront of this stuff, we've got to do as a city exactly what you guys do as the producers of that show every year.
The best thing that we have is that we're Fort Worth. That's the best part we have.
That's exactly
They can't duplicate that part. Yeah, you can build buildings, but it's Fort Worth.
Yep. All right, thank you.
All right, thank you all very much.
Thank you, Brad. Thank you, Matt. You want to say something, Chris?
No.
Our next item, council, is a presentation of proclamation for Emergency Medical Services Week. And I think that's Carlos.
I encourage everybody to get a Medstar membership to avoid a $1,500 taxi cab drive. If you don't have the membership, it's going to cost that. I learned the hard way.
Now with inflation.
Thank you, Mayor. All right. Fire, Medstar, associates thereof, come on, let's not be shy. Act like we like one another. All right, Mayor and Council, thank you again for listening to me and help me to give another proclamation that's again noteworthy. This time it's for Emergency Medical Services Week. As council knows, I serve on the Medstar Board of Directors, and that is a very challenging position. I've learned a lot since being on there, and I continue to learn much. It is a challenge to make sure that our medical services coordinate well, you know, with our first responder services, and we're a great team. We have our challenges ahead of us. We continue to work through those challenges to make our combined responses that much better. So, give you this if you can hold that, Ken. All right. I'm going to read the proclamation that here, on behalf of the Mayor and Council, that we're presenting. Whereas the members of Medstar Mobile Healthcare, Fort Worth Fire Department, and the Fort Worth Police Department provide life-saving care to those in need 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And whereas EMS agencies and personnel have expanded their roles by providing important preventative and follow-up care, access to telemedicine. EMS agencies continue to provide crucial services during COVID-19 pandemic. And whereas it is appropriate to recognize the value and the accomplishments of emergency medical services providers by designating Emergency Medical Services Week. And whereas in recognition of this event, we hereby proclaim the week of May 15th through the 21st of 2022 as Emergency Medical Services Week in Fort Worth, with the theme, EMS Rising to the Challenge. We encourage the community to observe this week with appropriate programs, ceremonies, and activities. Therefore, the City of Fort Worth does hereby recognize and proclaim May 15th through the 21st, 2022 as Emergency Medical Services Week in the City of Fort Worth. Congratulations all here and all not here that are part of the team.
You okay?
Mayor, would you like to go?
Sure.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, and Ken's going to give a Medstar update. Thank you, Ken.
Mayor and council, thank you for the proclamation, and thank you, Councilman Flores, for your contribution to our board of directors. I know it's always a lot of fun, so.
Every day.
My name's Ken Simpson. I'm the CEO for Medstar Mobile Healthcare here in Fort Worth. I'm gonna kind of give you a little bit of an update. Generally during EMS week in the past, we've done these annually. With COVID and whatnot, they were shortened a little bit. So there are a few extra slides this year, but I talk relatively quickly despite my South Carolina upbringing. So if you have any questions along the way, please feel free to interrupt and ask. A little bit about the vision of Medstar. In 1986, the gentleman on the screen, Bob Terrell, was the Fort Worth City manager, and he was looking for a better EMS service. He kind of came across a public utility model that had a very strong clinical emphasis on it, and it was in several cities had adopted this kind of model. It's built around an authority similar to a water department, that kind of stuff, so you got a lot more transparency into the system. Fiscal efficiency was also very clearly built into it, and it was really focused on providing emergency medical care. And so much like the gentleman was just talking about, instead of saying, can we do it, he said, let's do it. And so they got with the fire department here in Fort Worth and worked with them to provide first response. And that is how Medstar started many years ago. It's actually the Fort Worth Ambulance Authority. And 2 years later or so, around 1988, some of the suburban cities said, hey, that seems to be working pretty well. Is it something we could join as well? And the city of Fort Worth said, sure, that would be great. And the suburban city said, can we name it something that's not Fort Worth Ambulance Authority, since it's going to be running around in our city? And so Medstar was born. Over the years, we've changed. We've adopted mobile integrated healthcare, which is commonly known as community paramedicine. We'll talk about a little bit in this presentation. And there in the bottom picture, you see that was Mr. Terrell at our grand opening at our new headquarters. So I am told that had I interviewed at the old headquarters, I would not have taken this job. So it was a little scary looking, but we have a beautiful place over at Altamira, and we have one up north now. So I don't want to fail to recognize all the community partners that it takes to make Medstar successful. Councilman Flores obviously plays an integral part. Chief Davis and the Fort Worth Fire Department and all our community first responders do as well. Again, the system is really set up with having that early intervention for the time critical medical complaints and providing good medical care early on in the process. We thought the picture in the middle did a really good job depicting that. That patient was actually getting flown by care flight.
But how old is that picture of Carlos?
It's the one he provided to us. I don't ask questions like that. So, but anyway, with the work we do, Chief Davis also sits on our board, as does Councilman Flores, and we've had a great opportunity here to work with the city manager's office in the staffing study and providing feedback and information. And you all have been very gracious to work with us. We're very excited and proud to serve Fort Worth as we've done for the last 36 years here. So like I said, we want to make sure we thank all of those, including the frontline providers that really make it work for us. COVID presented some interesting challenges over the last couple of years. Basically what staffed unit hours are, a unit hour equates to 1 hour of having an ambulance available in the 911 system. And so what this tracks is basically ambulance availability. When COVID first came out in March of 2020, we really staffed up. We got ready. We saw the news articles like everybody else did of New York City and all the people getting sick and the hospitals getting overrun. And nobody wanted to go to the hospital in Fort Worth. And so we started talking to people, and they're like, y'all, patients think that's where the COVID is. And so we one of the advantages of our system is we have the ability to staff up and staff down based on census, much like hospitals do. And so we staffed down a little bit. And then as the volume kind of started coming back and COVID started hitting the region a little bit more, we worked on increasing staffing. Of course, over the period that we were experiencing the biggest swings in COVID, about 40% of our workforce, much like throughout the rest of the country, they or their families contracted COVID as well. So we had some challenges with that. We worked with our EMS System Performance Committee, which is made up of our first responder chiefs, to kind of troubleshoot and come up with some ideas to put up additional ambulance unit hours. We'll talk about that a little bit later in the presentation. But as you can see, it's very effective throughout the country. Nationally, we've seen big mass exodus from healthcare in general, especially EMS agencies. And we've actually been able to significantly increase the number of ambulances that we put on the street because of the collaboration that we have within the system. As we work through COVID-19, as I said, we kind of take a system approach to this. We did not want to, or we wanted to do as much as we possibly could to keep our hospital systems from being overrun with things like what we were seeing in New York City. And so early on, we worked with Office of the Medical Director. One of the big hallmarks of a public utility model and Medstar type model is independent medical direction, and Dr. Veer Vithlani is the system medical director. He's a very proactive gentleman. I think he spoke with you all early on in the pandemic. And we came up with some alternative destinations to keep low acuity patients out of hospitals. Because what was happening was people would test positive for COVID. They would call 911. We'd send an ambulance out, and they'd say, I tested positive for COVID. Okay, what else is going on? I tested positive for COVID. It's really bad. And so we created this kind of pamphlet, and we created a protocol where we'd have conversations with them about, okay, well, an emergency room may not be the most appropriate place for you to go right now. All the health systems have 1-800 numbers for you to call. They have the ability for you to access your PCP, really helping them to navigate to more appropriate entryways into the healthcare community than through the emergency room. Also during COVID, if you'll remember, visitors were significantly restricted due to the COVID concerns, and our patients they took a lot of comfort in not having to go to the hospitals and things like that, and they were able to be navigated away from that. We did patient surveys on the back end, and we got high satisfaction marks from the patients that we implemented this protocol with. A few of the other things that we did along the way, the top left picture there, every morning out in front of the building, those folks stood. We worked with Tarrant County Public Health, and we tested a list of people that Tarrant County Public Health would send to us. They drove up in their cars. We leaned in their window and kind of stabbed them in the nose and sent it off to Tarrant County Public Health, who ran their tests and let them know whether they were positive or not. We also participated in vaccine clinics. Some of them were put on here by the Fort Worth Fire Department, some by Tarrant County Public Health, and we also did mobile vaccine clinics in many of your districts as well, and the neighboring cities for those that might not have transportation means to get vaccines. We provided monoclonal antibody infusions with the Fort Worth Fire Department and our system first responders, and on the campus of Medstar. We also operated to provide these monoclonal antibodies, and for those that don't know what those are, they helped lessen the symptoms of COVID. And so we offered it to hospital systems as well because their appointments were all filling up. So we took some of the overflow. It's a time sensitive. You have 10 days from your diagnosis to get the monoclonal antibody treatments, and they had pretty good efficacy with keeping people out of the hospitals. So we looked for ways to offload some of the hospital system loads throughout the COVID pandemic as everybody experienced staffing shortages and whatnot. We also implemented a couple things like additional call screening to try to make sure our first responders, paramedics, and EMTs all stayed safe. So we would notify them that, hey, this patient has a high likelihood of having COVID. Go ahead and take a little bit of extra time, put some PPE on and things like that. Obviously, if they were experiencing time-sensitive emergencies like cardiac arrest where their heart stops, we didn't go through the additional screening process, but it did slow that down a little bit. Then we had staffing challenges as well. What that graph shows is our priority 1, 2, and 3 calls. When you call 911, if any of you have ever had to do that, they ask you like a bazillion questions, and you're like, would you just send an ambulance and stop asking me all these questions? They are sending an ambulance pretty much as soon as they identify what your primary complaint is, but what those questions do is they help us to triage what your medical complaint is and how severe the complaint is so that we can redirect ambulances if we need to and make sure that the appropriate first response is getting to you. In other words, if you're having a heart attack, you probably need more hands and more help than if you've had leg pain for 3 weeks. And people call us for leg pain for 3 weeks. So, but that's the difference between priorities 1, 2, and 3. Priority 1, we have an 11-minute response time standard from the time that the phone rings and we answer it until we get an ambulance on scene, and we shoot for an 85th percentile response time standard with that. The priority 3, we have a 17-minute, and priority 2 is a 13-minute response time standard. You will not be able to make the numbers out exactly on this, but this is really just a picture of how the response volumes have increased since 2017 until April of 2022. The one on your left is breaks it out by priorities again. The one on the right has them all combined together, the 1 through 3. That's over a 21% increase over 4 years. So, as Fort Worth has grown, so has the popularity in the 911 system. And we continue to look for innovative ways to address that. Fiscal efficiency, I mentioned that's one of the hallmarks of a public utility model. Because we are structured the way we do, we try to bring in outside entities to come in and have conversations and evaluate our data and provide reporting to back up what we say, so you don't just have to believe me when I stand up here and say, hey, we're fiscally efficient and we do a really good job. And we participate in a ambulance supplemental payment program with Medicaid patients. When we transport a Medicaid patient, we actually, even when they reimburse us, we lose money on every one of those transports. And so the state and federal government basically has this program that works to try to make up the difference, but they require us to participate in this cost reporting program. And for the last 7+ years, we've been the lowest cost municipal provider in the state of Texas. And there you see our total cost for this reporting period was $396.01 per response. So that significantly outpaces the rest. It's something we continue to look for ways to bring efficiency and value to the organization. This is a line graph that we've looked at. Everybody in healthcare is experiencing something like this. Don't freak out too much about it, but it's basically our revenue and expenses, and we have continued to watch that. It was projected to cross at some point where our expenses would exceed our revenue. COVID has kind of driven that a little bit faster than we anticipated. We do have some reserves to help with this, But in healthcare, I was reading an article the other day that across the healthcare spectrum, we've seen about a 37% increase in payroll just since over the last year. And so payroll cost is one of our largest expenses. It continues to drive, as everybody knows, there's supply shortages of like everything these days. And so that has also driven up our expenses significantly. Fuel, if you haven't gotten gas lately, it's a little more expensive today than it was a year ago. And so those are all things that we continue to look for ways to not only mitigate those expenses, but work with our payers and work with our insurance companies to find ways to drive increased value. As you see the insurance companies there, they pay less and less per ambulance transport. As Councilwoman Bivens pointed out, the ambulance ride typically costs somewhere around $2,000 now. We do have a Star Saver membership, which are our last slides, and I'll cover those. But we also revamped our charity care policy last year. And basically, we went through and said if an individual makes 400 times the federal poverty level and they're willing to provide us a documentation that they do and they don't have insurance, we will write off their bills. So you see, last year we wrote off just shy of $26 million in patient invoices that met the charity care criteria. Part of the reason we do this is the Medicaid supplemental payment program that I was talking about earlier. They revamped some of their programs, and they provide some matching funds. They're not going to provide us $26 million, but they provide some matching funds for the charity care program, or dollars that we write off as part of that. I mentioned the ability to put on additional ambulance unit hours, and our tiered ambulance deployment program is a big reason for that. Historically, the ambulances in Fort Worth have always run a paramedic and an EMT. Paramedics are often referred to as cardiac techs. Believe it or not, a large percentage of our call volume is low acuity calls. We've done a very effective job at teaching people to call 911, and they call 911 to access the healthcare system in large part. So that leg pain that I referenced earlier, they don't necessarily need a cardiac tech, and we saw an opportunity to allow 2 EMTs to be put on an ambulance instead of an EMT and a paramedic, which will help decrease the cost. EMTs are a little bit more available, and we offer scholarship programs to put our EMTs through school to get their paramedic credential as well. So it's an opportunity to move upwards. In the meantime, we're putting additional ambulances on the street, and through that call triage process that I mentioned earlier, we're able to better identify those low acuity calls for these BLS ambulances to be on. There are a couple other in EMS world really exciting things that are coming that offer great community benefit. And, in the world of value-based healthcare, it is expanding into EMS. Medicare started a pilot program, basically, it's a 5-year program. It's called Emergency Treatment, Triage, and Transport. Historically, ambulance services were only paid if they transported patients to the hospital. What this program does is again, we've been able to write some protocols the medical director has for these low acuity Medicare patients. And if we get out, we assess them, they have stable vital signs, and they just need something simple. We can say, hey, Mrs. Smith, an emergency room may not be the most appropriate place for you to go visit currently. We have the opportunity for you to speak with a physician by telemedicine, like a FaceTime type app. Is that something you'd be interested in doing? And if they are, we'll connect them. They're actually ER physicians that they do an online assessment with them. And it's been very effective over the last year. We've used it with 500 patients, and about over 70% of those we've been able to leave at home. Things like prescription refills. People run out of prescriptions and call 911 to be taken to the emergency room to have their prescriptions refilled. So we'll use these programs, and we'll actually have prescriptions delivered to their home in some cases with them. We've also had patients discharged from the hospital with discharge instructions like only drink clear fluids, and they go home and they eat dinner, and they start having abdominal pain and issues. And, again, we're able to connect them with the emergency room physician. The physician says, hey, we can treat you on scene, and you can follow the discharge instructions and switch to clear fluids and see if that works. the people are extremely excited to be able to stay with their family and not have their evenings interrupted and still receive good, appropriate care. Our Matt Zavatsky and our Medstar team have worked with CMS to structure this program, and we're really excited to see it grow and flourish. As it says there, we are one of only 40 organizations in the country that are currently doing this and billing for it. So one of our large commercial payers has also reached out to us, and we went in network with them March 1st. It's Cigna, and it's a very similar model, except they don't require the telemedicine component. The big advantage for insurance companies is they realize the amount of expense from the ER side for those low acuity patients, because that ER physician's never seen those patients before. So they're going to have additional tests and things like that run. So for the insurance company, it's a lot more cost effective for us to treat them on scene and take care of their needs there than have them taken to the emergency room. Medicaid's also going to be, starting September 1st, they're adopting a very similar program here in the state, so we're excited to see that happen. As we talked about kind of the crossing lines, we think these present some opportunities to help uncross those lines again. A couple of the other outside entities that come in and do the evaluation, I mentioned our discharge or our triage process through the emergency medical dispatch. And there's over 300 of those codes. The International Academies of Emergency Dispatch, they come in and evaluate the program, make sure we're triaging them correctly. They require us to do a quality assurance on several of these calls, or a percentage of these calls. They don't require us to be 100% correct on them, but we do have to show where we're providing feedback to the folks that are answering the 911 calls and how to better address those. The Commission on the Accreditation of Ambulance Services also is known as the gold standard in EMS. They come in and look at our policies and procedures and SOPs and whatnot, and make sure that we're actually doing those. They grab random employees and ask them questions about, hey, what do you do if you wreck an ambulance? Hey, what do you do if you get hurt? Where do you go? Who do you talk to? That kind of stuff. And for both of those, for over a decade, we've been accredited, and we're less than 0.2% of all the ambulance providers in the country that are accredited there. We use Ems Survey Team to provide survey feedback from our patients to make sure that they are satisfied with the service they get from the time that they call 911 until the time they receive their bill and work through the billing process. There you see a 92.71 satisfaction score out of 100 points. So we continue to work through that as our feedback. Community health program, I mentioned the community paramedic piece of this. We've been doing this since 2009. And we've been a national leader in this innovation. At one point, we ran a 911 nurse triage line, so those low acuity calls would get sent over to a nurse, so we wouldn't even have to send an ambulance out. For those who don't realize it, I know you all approve a lot of budgets in emergency vehicles and whatnot. Each one of those ambulances costs about $300,000 before you put people in the back of it. So it's one of the most expensive means of delivering medical care around. So the opportunity to intervene through the dispatch process and have these conversations with folks is a big win. We also utilize have a high utilizer program where we send folks out to visit with people that have called repeatedly 911 and find out why they're calling and try to intervene and redirect them towards more appropriate resources. This is caught on with some of our hospital systems and readmission programs where we go into the home, help them understand their disease process, like congestive heart failure. Eating too many salty McDonald's French fries will make you retain fluid and make it hard to breathe and things like that, and help them just to understand what's going on and how their decisions impact different things. And so we've had very positive feedback out of that with that. Since the program began, we've had over 13,000 Fort Worth residents that have been enrolled in the program. One of the areas I know is a big emphasis here is that 76104 and working with the population to really help improve the community health care that they receive. And we've had 377 residents in that area that we've serviced since the beginning of this program. I mentioned the EMS Survey Team. This is actually some of the feedback from the high utilizer group. And you see, as far as success of the program, we measure it as far as emergency responses and emergency transports. The objective is to decrease those. As I mentioned, it's very expensive to send the ambulance and 2 providers out there. And so we've seen about a 50% decrease in both responses and transports throughout the life of that program. This is actually from Southwestern. The bottom one's from Southwestern Health Resources as well. And that also shows a 50% decrease in the hospital admissions for our readmission avoidance program, just helping people understand what's going on with them medically. If you've ever been discharged from the hospital, you know you get inundated with discharge instructions, and a lot of people don't understand what's going on. It just gives them the opportunity to sit in their own home, ask questions, and for us to explain what's going on, make sure they can get their prescriptions, make sure their weight's being monitored, that kind of stuff. Our community health program outcomes, there you see, so we use this scale to gauge how patients feel about their own care from the beginning of the program until they're actually graduated from that high utilizer group, which is a 90-day program. They ask things like mobility and self-care and how you feel about pain and discomfort and anxiety, and then generally how you feel about your overall health status. And you see a 32.2% increase there in how they feel about their general health status, just understanding what's going on with them and how their decisions can help affect that. These are the things that we think EMS is going to be called to do is in the future. In the future is really, we're seeing it today, and helping the communities to live more healthy, fulfilled lives, understand what's going on with them, provide that community resource and the mobile outreach to these folks. This slide really just, as I mentioned, we did a nurse triage intervention through our dispatch center at one point, and we've stopped it because they changed the economic model for us, Medicare did. But while we were running that, again, we measure that in terms of payment avoidance, and it avoided about $6 million between ER visits and hospital transportation. And on a per patient basis, that's just under $1,300 that we saw that we were able to divert out of that with a relatively small number of patients that we intervened with overall. And again, the other side of this is you aren't gaining anything if the patients are mad because they didn't get an ambulance. The patient satisfaction scores, although there were some that weren't happy, it's a small percentage, less than 13%, 87% expressing satisfaction and appreciation with the interventions they've received. So some of the things that we've got new coming this year, in partnership with the Regional Advisory Council, we have had an ambus. We deployed it on the I-35 pileup over the wintertime. It's very effective for low acuity patients. In that particular case, we used it as a warming center and gave us the ability to triage the patients out of that accident. We also used it in a nursing home evacuation during the COVID pandemic. It will carry 17 patients laying down. The challenge with the patients that are laying down is it takes a lot of time to load 17 patients up. So by the time you kind of get to number 12 to 14, the first one you put on has to be taken off because they have to go to the restroom. So, we're very judicious about how we decide to deploy that, but it's a great regional asset. We will deploy it to hurricanes and things like that. We staff it with 6 EMTs and paramedics and a driver. In the old one before it had been down Houston during Hurricane Laura, I think it was. So we've got some new ambulance designs that have come out. The ambulance there is a remounted ambulance. It was actually hitting an intersection responding to, I'm actually pretty sure it was a leg pain. We added some bright yellow neon to it because there are a fair amount of motor vehicle accidents that occur with our ambulances, people running into them on scenes and things like that. And then we have deployed some additional supervisor and critical care paramedic vehicles as quick response vehicles for the higher acuity emergencies and additional contact that people need in the field. Over the next year, we're going to be looking at lights and sirens operation. What a lot of people don't realize is about 10% of our calls are truly time sensitive in nature. That is, they really matter, their life and death. They'll dispatch criteria and what those show as far as the acuity level of the patients. So reprioritization is another one of the things that we realize as we've gone through conversations around staffing studies and what response plans we send and things like that. A lot of the folks that are in leadership positions today for our first response agencies and with Medstar were not around at the time that the priority levels were set initially. And so we think there is a more scientific way to kind of make a determination as far as what the priority level should be. In other words, we have 3 years worth of data from those 300 emergency medical dispatch codes that say, hey, when you're running a call where somebody says my loved one is not breathing, there's a very good likelihood that on those calls, time matters, and it should be that should be one of your priority one calls. That's obviously one of the extreme cases, but we have criteria as far as ALS interventions for things like intubation and defibrillation when we put tubes in people's throats to help them breathe, versus, hey, they're perfectly stable. We really didn't do anything except give them a ride to the hospital. To really break out how those emergency medical dispatch codes and the priorities flow so we can ensure that the first responders and ambulances and whatnot are available for those high priority calls, and they're getting diverted to those high priority calls if need be. And the appropriate resource contingent is going to the lower acuity calls. Here's your Star Saver membership. So what the Star Saver membership is, for those that aren't familiar, the ambulance bill is somewhere around $2,000. We do not collect anywhere close to that, but for $69 for your entire household, basically what happens is we'll bill any insurance that you have on file. Whatever your insurance pays, we accept and we write any balance off. So you don't have to worry about balance bills or anything like that. It's actually a very good deal for a household. You register the people in your household. You typically have to do it beforehand, so you can't wait until the ambulance, until the ambulance comes to pick you up and go, hey, I want one of those Star Saver membership things. But it's been very beneficial, and as you see there's over 3,200 Fort Worth folks that are members of this program. We also, over probably 2 years ago, we started a Star Saver Plus membership program. One of the independent living facilities in the area, they enroll all of their residents as part of this program. And it's $350 a year, but essentially what it is, again, it covers everybody in the household. And you get a community paramedicine or critical care paramedic if you wake up and you just don't feel great one morning, but you don't really want to go through all the hassle and headache of going to the emergency room because you aren't sure whether it's just indigestion or whether you're having a heart attack. You can call us. We'll send a critical care paramedic out to come evaluate you and help navigate you into the appropriate care overall. So that's been a very beneficial program throughout the time frame. And then I, again, really appreciate everybody's time. We are very excited and very proud to serve Fort Worth and its residents. I hope you've taken away from this that as healthcare is changing, we have more and more opportunity and are expected more and more to function in more of a patient navigation position rather than just continuing to transport people to the emergency room. We have actually heard insurance companies say, I'm not terribly interested in continuing to pay you to transport folks to the emergency room in these low acuity patients. And what we found nationally even is patients have a much higher satisfaction rating when they kind of have that concierge care and can say, hey, emergency room may not be the best place for you. What kind of insurance do you have, or do you not have insurance? And there are a wealth of opportunities throughout the community here in Fort Worth that offer the opportunity to provide medical care to uninsured and underinsured, and we can serve as kind of that gap filler to help those folks find the care they need. So I'm happy to take any questions you all have.
Thank you, Ken. Any questions, council? Go ahead, Elizabeth.
I just have one. First of all, thank you for including the information about 76104. And when you talked about this new telemedicine program that y'all have implemented, and I think you're adding on an additional participant, correct? Or that's potential?
Yes, so we have one commercial payer, Medicaid, will be joining. We have another commercial payer that we're further in conversations with, or one of our larger commercial payers as well.
Can you expand a little on how that particular program can help us bridge the health disparities, specifically in areas like 76104, where we see pretty terrible health outcomes?
Yes, so it really comes down to community education and intervention and catching issues when they occur earlier rather than later. It provides us the opportunity to go out and visit patients that they may be, they may have a toothache, they may have, and believe it or not, if you don't treat toothaches, they can evolve into very significant other health system issues. And it offers our providers the opportunity to go sit with these patients, find out what's going on, do better screening. We have the ability to actually do blood labs in their home for point of care testing and help navigate them towards more appropriate earlier preventative care, because it's just like anything else. Our bodies are like that. If you don't change the oil in your car, you're going to pay for it exponentially down the road. If you don't offer preventative care and you don't go to the lengths to take advantage of preventative care or find opportunities in the community where you can get preventative care, it's going to evolve into very significant acute problems like renal failure and strokes and heart attacks and whatnot. This offers us the opportunity to get in front of these patients, offer them telemedicine consults. Hospital and homes, several of the hospital systems are actually doing hospital and home programs where you get discharged. They treat you just like you're in the emergency room. Just like you're in a hospital room, and they continue your care while you're at home. This offers very similar outcomes. And the interesting thing is historically people have kind of gone, well, that sounds like concierge medicine, and it will unfairly disadvantage higher socioeconomic groups. And what the studies show is the inverse is actually true, because there's somebody there that's intervening, that's making sure that person's getting to their follow-up care, they're getting the preventative care they need, and they're intervening in their daily life so they have better outcomes, because it's not just about quality or quantity, it's about quality of life as well. So that's the opportunities that we have and that we see on the future in the forefront. Yes, ma'am.
Council, anything else? Ken, thank you so much for the thorough presentation.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thanks.
Next up, Council, we've got our future City Hall update with Dana Bergtoff kicking things off.
Thank you, Mayor and council members. We're excited to be bringing you this quarterly update on our future City Hall project. I'm glad that Tanya Farley's here to do all the heavy lifting. I just wanted to provide a few opening remarks to say that there's a lot of great progress being made. We're having good conversations with all the different departments, talking about the different functionalities and floor layouts and amenities that we're going to be trying to provide for employees and hopefully future employees that we attract to the city in future City Hall. We're dealing with the challenges that every part of the economy is dealing with regard to supply chain. Tanya will dig into that a little bit more, but you'll see some of the effects that's having on our schedule. But again, great progress being made with Boca Powell and with our CMAR contractor, Lindbeck. And we also will touch on some of the opportunities that we're hoping to create for minority contractors to have a big role in helping us get this facility moving forward. So with that, I'll turn it over to Tanya. Thank you.
All right, good afternoon, everyone. Dana, thank you so much for kicking it off. As Dana mentioned, obviously, a lot of work has been done since our last update to y'all in February. I've spent quite a bit of time with several of you over the last couple months, and we'll talk about some of the involvement that members of this council and the mayor and the incredible staff at the city of Fort Worth have had to date. So we're going to talk a little bit today about where we're at with some of our early work packages. So we'll talk about the roof. We'll talk about our technology project that started late last year, and then we'll talk a little about some of the geotech studies and some of the components leading towards construction. We'll talk about some of the design concepts for the council chambers that we're looking at, that we've worked with members of city staff, with the community, and a number of you on this committee here to discuss about the chambers. We'll talk about the budget, where we're at today compared to our last update. Spoiler, it's still the same, but I like to cover it every meeting because I think it's important. We'll talk about timeline review. As Dana mentioned, we are living in a I don't want to say unprecedented because, you know, I haven't lived for eternity, but it has been a very difficult supply chain world. And so there's some things that we're doing to mitigate that, but there are some impacts I do want to talk about today. And then we have some really cool upcoming sessions and workshops that I want to share with the group. So to kick it off, you know, I like to cover our goals every time. I think it helps level set for the group. So, you know, as we dove into this program last year, we wanted to shape a inclusive and engaging public space. We heard that from all of you. We heard that from our community. We heard that from city staff and leadership. We want to continue to maintain a Class A look and feel, not only of the building, but of the site itself and any auxiliary facilities we build on site. Efficient, equitable, and flexible workspaces. We want to make the future City Hall sustainable and flexible for the next 50 years. We want to make it transformational, delivery of city services, both to folks in the community, but also bringing together collaboration of city staff, and then ultimately drive the vision for the next 50 years. So with that, a bit of an update of kind of where we're at. So on the roof replacement process, many of you that drive by the building frequently or go over there have probably seen that we had a crane up, a 40-foot crane up until early April. That was to complete the roof replacement project. We are on the final touches of the roof replacement process right now. They're using the freight elevators and doing some touch-ups on sealants and otherwise, but the team has been able to work really closely with the tenants in the building and city staff to navigate during this time period. As you can imagine, if you're a tenant in the building and we're replacing roof, it's not the most comfortable thing, so we've done a great job in partnership with them to make sure we're working after hours, we're being safe, et cetera. So kudos to Greg Wingate and Steve Cook and the property management group for everything they've done during this process to keep our tenants happy and to keep you know, that site safe. In addition, we just completed actually yesterday our geotech study of the site. You know, for those of you that have done new development or related, you understand how critical this is to driving the project forward. I'm happy to report that there were no negative findings from the geotech report on the site. There are a few things that we need to do in compliance with TRWD and with, you know, the regulations here at City of Fort Worth, but nothing out of the ordinary on the geotech study. You can see a number of the locations where borings were done on the site to make sure that, you know, if there's any mitigations or otherwise we need to take or any concerns that we were able to look at it. So several locations across the site, but as I mentioned, the findings came back really positive, so we're happy to hear that. Since our last session, we've also had a couple public-facing sessions. So one of them we had was in March, which was our customer service session for our one-stop shop floor. That's going to have development services and a number of public-facing functions. I want to thank Councilmember Crane and Councilmember Firestone for putting together a really great introductory video that talks about the goals of what the city's trying to do. So I appreciate y'all. Thank you. I know it's not always the easiest thing to do an intro video. I think I've pegged a couple of you so far for intro videos. If I haven't done it yet, your time is coming, I promise. So I appreciate your support. So it's coming soon, I promise. I promise. We got a lot of work to do, as you can imagine. So, and it was really great too. We had representation. You know, part of these projects, we want to make sure we get representation from the broader community, and the best way to do that very often is to engage a number of the groups that interact with these public-facing services in a number of fashions. So we had groups from, we had representation from Downtown Fort Worth Inc., Development Advisory Committee, Real Estate Council, Pan American Chamber of Commerce, Latino Chamber of Commerce, the Black Contractors Association, Historic Fort Worth Public Art, and a number of other folks that participated both virtually and in person. We were actually able to walk through the building and walk to the floor that will be the future home of our one-stop shop experience. It was really great to get feedback from the community on some of the pain points they have today, with a number of the functions being in, you know, up to 12 buildings across the city of Fort Worth. So bringing that together was great to hear. We also got to hear some great input on technology and policy related functions that DJ Harrell and the group from Development Services were able to hear firsthand. So overall, great session. It's helping to lead to the design package that we'll be going through tomorrow with our internal staff on the customer service experience, but overall great experience and great feedback from the city. We love these public-facing functions because our goal is to transform city services, so we have to hear from the folks in the community that are actually participating in that. So that's been great. We also, oh, I lost my clicker here. Okay, I can use that. We also had a session focused on our internal city staff on employee voice. So one of the things that, you know, when I sat down with, you know, David Cook and, you know, the council here, was talking about bringing together our city staff to work differently. And part of that is understanding how they work today, but ultimately how they want to work tomorrow, where there's pain points, where things would make their lives easier. And ultimately, we talk with Deanna and the HR group pretty often about recruitment and retention, right? That's a very important part of how a city continues to grow and continues to be as successful as the city of Fort Worth is. And so we had several weeks worth of employee voice sessions with employees across the city of Fort Worth from a number of departments to hear about how they work, what they're looking for in the new building, and which features support, their overall excitement to come to work. So we got a lot of great things from that. Obviously, I hear about parking and everything that I do. It's just nothing new. I heard the folks from the stock show talk about 91% of people wanted to drive alone and didn't want to take a shuttle. I think our survey of city employees was 93% wanted to drive single occupancy vehicles to work. So common themes across the board here, but heard a lot of great things from folks here, really about having collaboration across departments and across divisions within departments. So really excited. I'm excited to show you all some of the floor plans that come from this, probably in our next update in August as we kind of move along, but a lot of great things came from this session. No worries, thank you. Part of what we heard in our public sessions and our time with you and our work with Visit Fort Worth and a number of other folks was hearing about, bringing together the site. I know I've talked with a number of you, not only about the building, but what does the site for the future city hall look like? It will be the front lawn of the city, and so we want to make it something enticing, something interesting, and ultimately somewhere where people can come together to celebrate, to protest, or collaborate. And so a couple of things that the team drew inspiration from, not only from our interviews with y'all, but with the public and city staff, were just amazing water features around the city of Fort Worth. Ultimately, the council chambers and the building itself sits where the Trinity River used to run prior to being retrenched. So there's a rich history there of water and kind of the essence of that. And one of the things that came from those sessions was the concept of ripple, right? And ripple is interesting because when you think about it in a water capacity, it's very calming, it's very central. When you think about it in a community factor, things that start in City Hall, things that start at the municipality ripple through the community. And so we thought that was a really nice tie-in to the overall theme of the site. We also believe it's important to have a nod to that Western heritage of the group from the stock show talked about. And so one of the things we wanted to bring to the site is we need to have security, we need to have safety, we need places for folks to sit. What's a way to bring that all together in an artistic sense? Thank you so much, appreciate it. And so we looked at the cattle trails and the stockyards themselves, and we looked at some of the elements that are already on the site, from the limestone bollards that exist up top to some of the walls that exist on the site today, to bring together an overall site package called Ripple. So one of the things that we're looking at with this package is how we ultimately meet some of the needs that were brought forth by this council before. We want it to be walkable, we want it to be inviting, we want it to be a place where people can collaborate. So a couple of things we want to call to your attention. So we talked about the cattle trails. You can see this running through the site. This serves as a protective bollard coming off the roads for the council chamber, for the site, for otherwise. It also provides a place for people to sit, people to interact, and ultimately looking down from a 20-story building is actually a really cool visual. A couple of things you'll see here, you'll see kind of the wavy, flowy concept of the river, of the waterways flowing through the site, providing all kinds of walkability throughout. You also see a connection here, stairwise coming down from the front of the building that does not exist today. It's something we felt is very important to bring together the building to the ultimate council chambers facility. And then ultimately over here, last thing I want to call out is we want to have an area that serves as a place for people to gather, for people to celebrate, for people to collaborate, that is safe, that is open, and is flexible, right? I know that there's so much that goes on in the city of Fort Worth. We want a way to bring that all together. So this is kind of the crossroads area of the city of Fort Worth, and we talk about everything that's happening here in the past, today, and tomorrow, and bringing that all together. So a lot of cool concepts on the site. You'll see the site in just a second as we go through some of the concepts for the council chamber building itself, but I wanted to kind of cue up what brings this site together as a whole. So what's important in the council chamber itself? So we worked with y'all, we worked with city staff, we worked with the community, and frankly, with best practices across the country, and some of the elements that came as required from staff, from yourselves, and from another number of other folks were a main chamber for the public session, obviously, a work session room for sessions just like this, an executive session room to make it easier for transition, for overflow, et cetera. AV and IT control rooms. We understand that in this world, more than 60% attend council meetings virtually, so we need to make sure we have the technology and the flexibility to support that. a staff workroom. We know that these council meetings can be long. We need place for your district directors, for city staff, for otherwise to be able to go work and come in and out of meetings in a safe and effective place. A green room for staging, for meals, otherwise, and then ultimately public and staff restrooms. Councilmember Bivens talked earlier about some of the security concerns that Marshal Swift and his team have done a great job to address in the past. We've worked really heavily with Marshal Swift to design something that is supportive for the future and safe for the future. So something to consider there. So key areas of focus, right? So safety and security is paramount for a council chamber. Welcoming and transparent, also paramount. As you can imagine, those are two very difficult things to accomplish together. And so it's something that we balance with all the time. It's a very fine line to draw, but we've come up with some really great secure pathways to and from the chambers for our elected officials, for our staff members that don't exist today in this kind of facility, providing safety for the council members, for the elected officials to go back and forth, as well as staff, but also flexibility to go through the public entryways and otherwise. So we're excited about those. We'll share those in the coming months, and I think it'll be a nice addition to the overall facility. So let's talk about the elements of a council chamber. So this is something that I refer to as our dollhouse view, right? So a couple things I want to point out. So these are obviously concepts in the middle, but I want to call out some of the key rooms here. This is on the first floor. So this is a 2-story council chamber facility with our pre-council, with our work session room on the ground floor, as well as the executive session room here, making it easy to go back and forth. We also have our server room here for broadcast, IT, etc. We have staff here to support the broadcast of the room. We have an IT workroom. We have bathrooms here as well, coming just off the entryway. We have a nice broad entryway that can come in off of the site itself or from the ground level, the terrace level that exists today. You see a nice welcoming winding staircase that will go up here, an elevator here as well, and then you also have staircases and elevators back here. A couple things I want to point out. So
Can you just orientate right there? Is that where that cafeteria is right now?
Yes, this is the cafeteria, correct, yes. I know sometimes they look so real, sometimes you gotta take a step back. So couple things I want to point out here. There is a secure pathway that's shown on this that is for elected official staff otherwise to come down from the building into the facility without passing through any unsecure areas. So obviously we have secure pathways on this level and then on the council level as well. But providing options for yourselves, for staff, otherwise to come and go. It also is great for emergency and safety situations. Like I said, we've worked with Marshal Swift and team to identify several areas for that. So there's an elevator and staircase back here that's completely secure. You also have elevator and public stairway here. So let's go to the main council level real fast. So one of the things we talked about is having a bigger council chambers, right? We know the city of Fort Worth is continuing to grow. It's the 12th largest city today. We're hoping it will continue to grow and flourish as it has. So we want to support that growth. So we're looking at a roughly 250-seat council chamber. The designs of the dais and otherwise are not finalized. This is still model at this point in time. So I'm sure we'll have plenty of conversations around your thoughts there. But as y'all continue to add council districts, that dais does continue to grow. So something to think about as we move along. We'll be looking at a very welcoming, inviting entryway off of the lobby. So this is the lobby level of the building today. We'll be having the ability to come off of the escalators, off of the lobby level, have a nice welcoming entrance to the council chamber that allows you to come in. We're looking at a vestibule here to support entry and exit of the council meetings. We know they're long meetings. We want to make sure that it's not distracting for folks when they're coming and going. So these are looking at to be ballistic glass areas so that folks can see in, see what's going on, but it's also safe. It also provides for an acoustic barrier going in and out of the chamber. So we're excited about what this can come together and look like. You can see kind of the other view of the staircase here. It allows folks to go up and down, and then you have obviously restrooms and otherwise on this floor as well. So all of the elements that were required for this facility, as well as an emphasis on safety and an emphasis on transparency, as you're seeing here, and also with the dais, I think we've accomplished with the models to date. So now the fun part. I want to start to show you what some of this can start to look like. So I talked about the staircase. So looking out on that terrace that I showed you earlier from the site plan, being able to look down. This is the cafeteria area over here, so being able to look down, have a nice, welcoming, inviting area. One of the things with a council chamber that's obviously difficult is you want to make it light and airy, but it also has to be great for broadcast, TV, and otherwise. So a little bit of a challenge. We'll talk about some of those components in the design. Ultimately, through all of our sessions with y'all, all of our sessions with the public, with staff, a number of working sessions with city leadership, we came up with 3 schemes for the council chamber building. So scheme 1 was called River Rock. River Rock was based off of the ripple concept that we talked about a minute ago that was kind of shaped by the area that it's in. It has, quite a bit of glass and metal and stone to mimic the skin of the building that exists today. It also provides for, an interesting view coming off of Forest Park as well as from the site itself. The second scheme was called Flight. Flight is very interesting because it is a nod to everything that Fort Worth has been, currently is, and the direction which Fort Worth is going, which is up and continued trajectory. This brings a really unique element to the site and has elements of mass timber, some really cool opportunities for us to have an expression piece on the front of the building, and then ultimately you can see a nice walkway for folks to enter the facility. We talked a lot about with y'all, with the public, a front porch for the community, somewhere where people feel welcome, where they can come. And so ultimately that spawned our last concept, which is called the porch. The porch brings together, this overhang element. You see it performing arts facilities, you see it art venues, and really, a council chamber is a performance venue. And so bringing that together, having a nice covered area, but providing, a walkway and inviting front porch area for the city of Fort Worth. So, after working with city leadership, members of the public, our staff, our steering committee, we are moving forward with work on 2 different designs. So we're moving forward with the porch and Flight to explore further, to work on further design concepts and see how it all comes together. Ultimately, a lot still to be done on these, but we're excited about kind of where they come together. So I'm going to take you a little bit further on this so you can start to live in this for a moment. I know I talk a lot about numbers and timelines and otherwise, so today will be a little bit more fun. We're going to get to see how some of this comes together. So how was the porch formed, right? So we talked a lot about some of the incredible things that exist today in the city of Fort Worth, in addition to being a front porch for the people. So we talked about the Kimball Museum, we talked about a lot of the areas in the city of Fort Worth, some unique designs when it comes to natural wood and otherwise, and how it all comes together. So the design process really looked at a couple different elements. So with the porch, you're obviously looking for inviting, but you're looking for roofing and shading. We know it gets warm. We know that there's a lot of folks in the city of Fort Worth, especially in City Hall today, that like to spend time outside. And so we want to have an area that is inviting for that. We want it to be transparent, right? We talked about it has to be safe, but it has to be transparent. We want to be an open and honest and transparent government here, and that's something that we're driving with the design as well. We also want it to connect to the building and look like it was made to be, complementary to the building itself. So we looked at a couple things that mimic some of the metal and glass that exists with today. The skin, we want to mimic some of that beautiful blue stone that exists today on the site, and then ultimately provides, as I mentioned, a really interesting base front-facing wall that I think as we go along will be great for either design, artwork, or a really cool kind of facade there as well. So ultimately, let's see if I can. There we go. So I'm going to give you a little bit of a 360 view here. Obviously, this is a rendering. So some of the people are walking, but they're not really walking. We are not installing a treadmill right there, but it looks kind of cool. But gives you a little bit of view of what this site could look like. Obviously, a very stark contrast to kind of what we have going today, but gives a nice, inviting site for folks to come and gather, places to walk. During long council meetings, a place for folks to go and meet outside. Ultimately with daytime and nighttime council facilities, as well as for city staff to come together, meet, have lunch, etc. So a lot of cool concepts. I want to look down on the site now a little bit to talk about this kind of patio area that we mentioned here. So it is 2-story, yes. So the main level, as I mentioned, is the pre-council level, and the top is the main council level. So the 2 stories that I showed you early on. No. Hey, trust me, I'm with you. So this is the terrace level. This is the lobby level. Oh yeah. Hey, I like that. Woke you up. I'm happy about that. I like it. Yeah, so a couple things I want to point out here. So you're seeing, obviously, these are stairs right here. This is a great place for people to sit, gather. Otherwise, you think about the big steps that are in front of, council chambers and performing arts venues across the country. Kind of ties into this site right here. You can see the terrace here that we have, the two-part slope terrace, ties in with the ripple concept on the site. If you've been to the site today and looked down, there's just a big, kind of interesting awning there that I've found out. I don't know how it got built because it didn't go through some of the permitting processes, but we're gonna make sure that we accommodate this incredible area right here. We've looked at tying into the walkways here, because keep in mind, this is a 5-sided building, right? You're looking down from the tower itself, from all members, so it has to give that view. It has to provide shade, and ultimately, with our cafeteria right in here, an area for people to come out, have lunch, and gather as well. This is kind of looking from that, underneath here, looking up. The walkway, shaded, but the ability to come into the chambers through here. Ultimately, you have the walkway into the building itself through here as well. And then this is that plaza area. I think there's a lot of really cool concepts that can happen there. From across the river, obviously, that's an important part, driving down Forest Park, being able to see the facility. You can kind of see what that would look like. Ultimately at night, right? We know that one of the things people love about the current building is the lights on top of the building, so it's incredibly important that this facility is a complement to that. And so we looked at uplighting here. We're looking at a number of lighting concepts that could be on the windows or otherwise, so a lot to come from that. I'll be looking for input from y'all as we go along. I think I probably get 3 or 4 emails a week from staff and the public asking if we're going to keep the lights on top of the building. So I'm happy to say we are. And so we want to tie that into the facility itself. So this is the front porch. I think, a really cool concept overall looking across. I think, it's important for it to tie into the building, but also be its own deal, right? It's important to stand alone. So the other concept is flight. So let's talk a little bit about that. So with Lockheed, with American Airlines, with some of the wonderful things here in the city of Fort Worth, as well as, the Dallas-Fort Worth Airport, we wanted to tie in this concept to the council chambers. And Bell. I actually played in the Bell Helicopter Armed Forces Bowl at Rice University. We played Air Force, and we won. So, I have good memories here. But so, yes, Bell as well. I'll take my wins where I can get them, right? So, I went to Rice, so there weren't a ton of them. So roof and shading, you'll see here a little different concept. You'll see this kind of like sunshade here. The beautiful thing about this building shape is that it looks really cool. It mimics flight. It's very tough from a sun perspective. So there's a lot of things we got to do because we have council meetings all hours of the day, right? Going forward, we want to make sure that we're protected throughout. We're not increasing our HVAC costs. We're not increasing exposure, et cetera. So a couple things we looked at here. Transparent, obviously, for the chambers. The connector, you'll see similar. The skin's a little interesting on this one. We looked at kind of bringing the grid of Fort Worth into the design of the building just to kind of give it a little pizzazz, something we'll look at going forward, and then ultimately that same kind of base in front of the building. So this is flight, and I'll give you the same kind of look around here. It kind of gives you a view of the parking garage that exists today. You can see this kind of awning over here. There's an entrance right there. A lot of greenery on this one planted inside because there's more direct light coming down. The site itself, obviously, a lot of trees we're going to have to plant because of the ordinance, but also to bring together the site as a whole. The flow of kind of the walkways here, it's something that I think will be really important for folks as these meetings start to evolve. You can see these really cool concrete pillars here that kind of diverge. I think it's a really nice visual aid. And then ultimately, that staircase that I showed you earlier runs right up and down through here. So I think, a lot to be accomplished there. Looking down, similar site plan here, just a few tweaks to this coming in and out. Once again, you can see the staircase here. You'll see a third level here on both of these diagrams. That third level is a connector for staff and otherwise to come down from the building in a secure pathway. So elevator and staircase. So something that, no functions up there other than entrance and exit. We know that as a city grows, it is more and more important to have safe pathways as well as exit plans. So kudos to Marshal Swift and the team and all the folks we've worked with the city for really helping us bring together some options for city staff and otherwise to work. Just another view here. You can see bollards in this one. We had bollards on the other one as well. They will be removable. We think it's important that if there's events, food trucks or otherwise, you want to bring in and out, obviously for fire truck, exit and entry as well. But ultimately too, if we're having folks there, we want to make sure that they are protected. We live in a crazy world and we want to make sure that there's protection really at every turn as we go through this site. You can kind of see the sunshade that I mentioned here as we move along. So once again, I want to give you the view across the way. Obviously, the kind of flight V look that you have, wings here, is an ode to the building itself, as well as to the concept. So kind of a nice tie-in. Like I said, we want it to be complementary without it looking like it was built at the same time, because this is a new time in the city of Fort Worth. This is a new staff, new council. We want to make sure that it reflects the community that we're all elected to represent. View at night as well, kind of interesting with the natural wood here coming off the mass timber, just to kind of give an interesting feel here. Across the river, you can see the tie-in with the light. I think that's a really important part. And then ultimately, the site as a whole. So those are the two concepts we're moving forward with at this point in time. Obviously, a lot to be done on the interior. You notice I didn't show you much interior. There's still a lot coming on that. I'll continue to work with y'all as we move along, but I'm very excited. The staff we've talked to, the elected officials I've worked with so far, our public have been very excited about this. And ultimately, we feel like these can be a place where people want to come and spend time, where they want to come to council meetings, where they feel safe, they feel welcome. We'll talk a little about some of the things in the chambers itself for accommodating our ADA folks, whether it's hearing loop, whether it's ramp, whether it's otherwise. We want to make sure that everyone feels welcome at these chamber meetings. So something that we're looking at. All right, so I'm going to shift gears here for just a second. Any questions on this before I move along?
Elizabeth, sorry, that was really loud.
Both of those designs are absolutely stunning. I have a favorite. And my question is, I love the flight. I love that mimics the building, but we do lose the shade. Is there a reason why it can't go out farther the same way Porch did to provide that shade? Is that like a structural thing?
It can go out farther. The problem we have is most of the light issue actually comes in from this side. And so we would have to re-angle the tilt of the flight component. And so that's something we're looking at.
Okay.
Like I said, a lot that can still be done there, but I wanted to call it out. It's a challenge we're facing.
That's cool. And I just want to thank you. When we sat down and talked, we talked about that trail system on the lawn.
Yes.
And it was just a harebrained idea. And that's amazing. So kudos to you and your team. That's far better than what I could have imagined when we talked about that. So thank you.
I appreciate it. Thank you. And thank you for the input.
And Carlos had a question.
You've probably already considered this, but when you're looking at this slide, they're not numbered when you have the configuration of the council chamber.
Yes.
Again, understand it's preliminary. Were any evaluations looked at when you're trying to maximize occupancy in there? Because I just see, it's very, at least as far as where the people are seated, and I understand it's pretty straightforward, very rectilinear, but maybe on the wings, I don't know if you can cant them or without losing too many seats, just to facilitate, viewship, if you will.
Sure.
For those people sitting at the wings.
So definitely something we've considered and worked through. We have a really wonderful broadcast and AV team on board the design team. And one of the things they've studied is what we call line of sight from all of these components. So we're looking at a number of things when it comes to the dais design itself. So I mentioned that's not finalized, the half moon concept, but we're looking at a number of different functions, including video wall concepts behind the elected officials to make it easier for folks to be and hopefully to have less TVs hanging in the facility. As far as the entryway, the facility itself, definitely things we can study and look at. Part of what we're balancing is security, overall flow in and out, and then ultimately how it accommodates broadcast. So I joke with you all the time. It feels like we're doing a very complex Rubik's Cube here, and once we get all the stickers done, y'all like to move the stickers around, and so it's something that we've definitely considered. But I'll bring that back to the team and see if there's anything else we can do.
Sure, I'll leave it up to you to work out the details.
Yeah.
Just asking.
I
Make
appreciate
sure
it,
that
yeah.
gets considered. Thank you.
Go ahead, Leonard.
A quick question on the roof. I don't know why this came to mind, but given the size of it, did we think about solar panels or anything energy related in using that area?
So you sir, are 2 steps ahead, and I like that. So we are looking at several concepts for the roof of the building. And so once we get direction on whether it's going to be flight or the porch, right, there's a couple different things to look at. So number one, we've got a lot of support for a green roof type concept. So whether that's live greenery, whether that's, some sort of combination, ultimately this is a 5-sided facility, right? So we want people to be able to look down from the building and not just look at a big white space or a big colored space. So number one, that's something we looked at. From the solar panel, we have not yet looked at that, but that's something that the team has brought up. We have Sinclair Digital on our design team, the group that designed the Sinclair Hotel and does a lot of alternative energy concepts. They have suggested that, and that's something that's part of phase 2 of the design of this building. So I'll definitely take that back to the team and see, once we get direction on the chambers, what makes sense from that capacity.
And Gina had a question.
I want to thank you for the presentation, even the part when I was dozing off. My favorite city hall is Philadelphia.
Sure.
And
Beautiful.
I think we have the makings for an iconic city hall, and I salute you for that.
Thank you.
When we redid the city hall in San Antonio, I convened meetings with the media to make sure that their accommodations were appropriate.
Yes.
Media has changed a lot now, and you can just be anywhere and be media.
Sure.
But, have we met with media? Do we have, accommodations for their mics to plug in? Just have we had any type of interaction with them?
Yes, so that's a wonderful question. In some of our projects previous, including Los Angeles County, we actually built a media bay for folks. Obviously, that's 10 million people, so a little different concept, but we have had interaction with some of the local media groups. Michelle Goot has been awesome about facilitating that for us. As we move along and start to work through, some of the more detailed designs of the internal side of the chambers, that will definitely be something that will work more in detail with them. A lot of groups, there's some groups that prefer to come in like they did today and hook up and catch their feed here. There's also groups that, prefer to go outside and catch the feed outside the building as well. So we're gonna, work with the local groups. We're gonna use Michelle as a conduit and then kind of figure out what makes sense.
Well, I still have my key to the Dallas press room. I had my key here, which is out there,
Yep.
but that key doesn't work anymore. But in terms of planning for the future, we know that Dallas has 14 plus 1 council members.
Correct.
And when you talk about the space, I looked at the dais, I saw that, are we keeping in mind that we may get to the point where the council grows beyond these 2 new seats coming?
Yes.
So are we looking at that?
Yes, so that's a wonderful question, and part of what we're looking at with the dais concepts, and like I said, we're looking at several, you're seeing one here, but some of the things we're looking at, number one, is how many council members and folks will be on the dais, which will be in supporting areas, right? We know that, say, the city attorney, the city manager, city secretary, a number of other functions are also on the dais. And so something to look at is best practice for most cities has those folks located just off to the side or in a support area. So what we're looking at is building in flexibility so that we can accommodate if we want everyone on the dais now, and then ultimately if we want to shift later and have only elected officials on the dais and supporting staff otherwise, that we'll be able to accommodate that. So something we're looking at, something we've considered. I know I've talked to Dana and the team a lot about what that projected growth for the city council may look like, both here and in the tower itself for staff and otherwise. I know we've talked to y'all about district directors and those kind of components. So looking at a number of things, it's definitely difficult. I can't lie to you, it's a difficult challenge, but something we're definitely looking at.
Leonard?
Quick question, is
Chris,
on
too.
the first floor, you may have mentioned this, is there a caterer's kitchen?
Yes. So we actually will have, this area right here is going to be a catering, kitchen, staging area that will have a bit of a walk-up window where folks can grab food or walk through and be taken down here. So we have that set up in this facility as well as the green room concept here. So
Great.
yeah, that was something we heard loud and clear from a lot of folks, where we want to create a little bit of separation of space.
Chris?
And while you're on this, can you kind of point out the common area for the district directors?
Yes, so we have a staff workroom that's set up over here. It's gonna be pretty large. It's gonna have a number of desks and drop-down areas. It will have charging, connectivity, et cetera. We're still exploring with, city staff and otherwise what we wanna have in that room. Obviously, I think it makes sense to have, a TV, a media wall to see what's happening in the chamber, but, is it printing, is it otherwise? Something we're gonna work out with the group, but that'll be located just off of the work session room for now.
I just think it needs to be able to accommodate all the district directors and mayor and council staff as well.
Yes.
Because it would be, I guess, it would be hard to get from the offices upstairs all the way down there in a timely manner like they do now.
Exactly.
So I think that's kind of important and I think printers and TVs and everything where they can work right in that area.
Yes.
The other concern I had was, I think it was the next slide, this one. And I know this is not the end all be all, and I see how you got the 2 seats on the side, and I guess, I don't know if that's for like the city secretary? Have we talked with them? Because we want to make sure that it's really comfortable enough where a lot of times they're able to stand up and talk right directly to the mayor or one of us and put them on the side may not accommodate the quickness, as well as how will assistant managers, ACMs, and be seated in the way this is set now. Because sometimes we can look at each other and kind of make eye contact and ask
Nonverbal,
questions.
yeah.
So I think that's something we should look at. And are those restrooms in the back behind?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. Yeah, we have public and private restrooms. Yeah, no, but those are great elements of feedback. And like I mentioned, as we move along in internal design, we'll be doing line of sight studies. I might put some of you in an Oculus headset and kind of see what it feels like in the facility, but definitely something we need to consider as we move along. Anything else?
Anybody else, council? Go ahead, Jared.
I just want to say this was an awesome presentation. Thank you for bringing all the visuals in. Also want to highlight what Leonard mentioned about solar and a living roof concept. I know Britt up the road does it very well and has done it very well. And so I think it would be great to see that not only for the energy savings that both a living roof and solar panels provide, but also aesthetics looking downward on the roof, seeing a nod to the prairie in addition to
I agree.
cow trail that y'all are creating with the bollards is really cool. So appreciate that.
Cool, thank you, I appreciate it. Okay, if there's no more questions here, I have a couple more slides I want to run through that are less exciting but very important as well, I promise. So I wanted to just cover, in addition to the design concepts today, I always like to provide an update of where we're at budget-wise. So as Dana mentioned, obviously we're in a very interesting supply chain and procurement world. At this point in time, our budget is still unchanged. We have not added any scope or any requests for dollars at this point in time, so you can see kind of the progression since our first presentation. I do want to highlight just a couple things since our last presentation. The components from the 2022 notes that the team from finance and the city staff did an incredible job working through. Those have all been completed and funded. So we are moving forward with our M&C for Lindbeck, as Dana alluded to earlier on. So I'll talk about that in just a second. I do want to highlight we still have a $3.8 million deficiency versus the planned budget that was adjusted a few months back on this project. So I want to highlight that as we move along, our team is doing the best that they can to combat inflation and raising prices, but something I do want to call out that going in shorthanded is going to be very difficult. So something we'll talk about kind of as we move along, and I continue to ask for your help as we move along in that direction. On the council chamber's schedule, so as I mentioned, no planned increase on cost as of yet. The team's done a great job of mitigating through a number of different functions, including we're going to be issuing some very early procurement packages. As Dana mentioned, we're going to be breaking up the packages for the project into smaller and quicker packages so that we can get a lot of minority and local participation, as well as combat supply chain timing and delays. So something that will come in very soon. We had originally targeted a January 2024 substantial completion of the project as a whole, with the council chamber being delivered in May, June of 2023. Due to extreme delays, 9 to 12 months for roofing materials, HVAC equipment, a number of other core functions for the facility, we do have a slight change in schedule I want to call out. So the new council chambers facility is targeted to be delivered in fall of 2023, with substantial completion of the project still coming in Q1 of 2023, just shifting some things around. We have been working with city staff, PMD group, a number of functions to accommodate our new council members that come on in 2023. So we're still working through, will those council members and yourselves be located at the new facility prior to the new chambers being built? Will there be additional work done here? We have a number of plans in place. I'll continue to have conversations with y'all and we'll work that out together. But the message I want to bring there is, the team's working as fast as they can, and we have a lot of options in place to support you and the team. So last but definitely not least, I want to, as always, want to brief you on kind of what's upcoming. So tomorrow we have our internal customer service floor sessions. We've worked really close with a number of the functions of the city of Fort Worth that are public facing, that have customer service functions. We're going to walk through some design concepts, some floor concepts, and really start to figure out how we operationalize this to transform city services. As Dana mentioned, next Tuesday, our Lindbeck M&C for their contract will be coming to this council for approval. I'll be here if there's any questions or otherwise, today and next week as well. But, this team has done, Lindbeck has done a phenomenal job as our partner to date. We're excited to get this contract issued to them so that we can start to issue packages to our community and, ultimately, as I mentioned, combat the supply chain issues that we're facing by ordering things sooner rather than later. Our second round of employee voice sessions will take place in June, where we'll hear more from city staff and some of the folks about what they're looking for in the building, look at more design concepts. And then ultimately, tower floor demolition packages and site mobilization will start to take place in June. So we will start to demo some of the floors that are being renovated. We'll start to do some site work. You'll start to see fencing, construction materials, or otherwise come up at the site. So that does mean that we will be limiting the amount of events that take place at the new building during this time period starting in June. We want everyone to be safe. We want to be able to meet our timelines. So I continue to ask that if things are looking to be scheduled at the facility, run it through, property management group and that function, and I'll work with them to kind of make sure it's safe and accommodating for the site. But we're excited to get the demo packages rolling. We're targeting a groundbreaking for the council chambers facility in August or September. So ultimately that will be a great event for yourselves and for the community. We're excited to bring people out, but a lot moving really fast. And I, appreciate y'all's continued support, your continued feedback. And, I look forward to continuing to work with y'all. So any other questions or thoughts from me today?
I did have one question. I don't know if I missed it on the garage, the parking. Go ahead.
Yep, so we are looking at 3 different options for the parking garage to add additional parking. As I mentioned, with the current parking garage structure and the planned move of city staff, we would be deficient in parking with no additional parking added. So we're looking at 3 options. So option 1 is augmenting the current parking structure to add 2 floors. We found through a structural analysis that we can only add 2 floors. So that starts to solve the problem, but doesn't completely solve the problem. We're looking at adding a net new parking garage where the flat parking on the back area is. We're looking at kind of a hybrid between the two. So the team's doing analysis on that. We'll be meeting with the city manager and his team next week to kind of talk about some of those options. And then I'll send an interim update to this council about kind of what we're looking for there. But ultimately, that is a hot button issue across the city, as you heard from the folks at the stock show as well as the convention center. So something we're looking to solve.
Any other questions? Thank you, Tanya.
Cool.
Great
Thank
job.
y'all.
Appreciate you. Council, our next update is on Marys Creek Water Reclamation Facility permit with Chris Harder.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. Here to provide some good news related to the Marys Creek Water Reclamation Facility permit. As part of this presentation, I'll be going very briefly over some of the background, since I know most of you are pretty familiar with this project, and then talk some about the recent events. And specifically what I'm talking about there is, as you know, we were in a contested hearing related to this permit. But on a parallel track, what we were doing is we were working through mediation with the 2 affected parties, and that's Tarrant Regional Water District and Martha Leonard. So out of those mediation discussions, a settlement agreement related to an indirect reuse project was put together. The settlement agreement has been finalized, and actually I'm happy to report this morning that Tarrant Regional Water District voted on that settlement agreement and approved it. So we do anticipate having the settlement agreement before you on the next council meeting on May 24th. I also want to go through the settlement agreement terms and talk about the benefit to Fort Worth and Fort Worth water customers related to this agreement, and then talk about the next steps. So I said I'd be very brief on this. You know that the planning for this project goes back 20 years. In 2009, a Citizen Advisory Committee was put together. They were charged with not only looking at options for the site, but also expectations for the facility itself. The Community Advisory Committee did recommend a site. In 2011, Council purchased that site for the cost of about $4.9 million. 2017, we hired a consultant to help us with the discharge permit application. In 2018, that application was made. In 2020, we received a draft permit from the TCEQ. We went through the public notice, the public comment period, the public meeting. TCEQ assembled all those comments and responded to each one of those comments in writing, and that response was received in 2021, which also, as part of their response, they reaffirmed the permit. In November of 2021, the commissioners held a meeting where they referred the permit to the SOA, and at that time, they also identified one of the affected parties as being Martha Leonard. In February of 2022, SOA had their preliminary hearing where they also added Tarrant Regional Water District as another affected party. And as I mentioned, parallel with the contested hearing process, we met with both Marty Leonard and Tarrant Regional through mediation, and we are now at the point where we have a settlement agreement that we at the staff level certainly support. So just to give you a idea where the plant is, where the discharge is, and where our collection facilities are at, the red outline that you see here is the Marys Creek Water Reclamation Facility. The blue line you see is Marys Creek itself. It flows by about 7 to 8 miles before it reaches the Clear Fork, and then another 7 or 8 miles before the Clear Fork reaches the West Fork. The green lines you see are our existing wastewater collection lines. And as we've talked about in the past, one of the concerns that we have is that without this plant, we would be looking at upsizing our collection system from West Fort Worth all the way to where our existing wastewater treatment plant is, and that's at Village Creek, which is over 30 miles to the east of this facility. So as part of our plan for this facility, we will not only be serving the area upstream of the plant, but we will be looking at putting in a series of lift stations that have the potential to move wastewater from those trunk mains in both where the Clear Fork Marys Creek confluence is, the Walnut Creek Marys Creek confluence, and then the south and north fork of Marys Creek are. So what we will anticipate having is a plant on the west side that can treat flow from Marys Creek, Walnut Creek, and potentially Clear Fork. So let's talk a little bit about the settlement terms themselves. As part of the settlement, Tarrant Regional will be taking ownership of the permitting, design, construction, operation, and maintenance of an indirect reuse project, which consists of an impoundment on Marys Creek, an intake, a pump station, a pipeline to connect the pump station to their existing water supply system, which is the Eagle Mountain Connection Pipeline. As far as the city's obligations, we will request TCEQ to do a minor amendment to the draft permit to add a 6 milligram per liter total nitrogen limit into the permit. We will agree to limit our discharge from the Marys Creek facility to 3 MGD during dry weather events for the period where Marys Creek would be in operation and the indirect reuse project is not in operation. And then if the indirect reuse project is deemed to be infeasible for some reason, we would do another minor amendment to the Marys Creek permit to further reduce our phosphorus limit from 0.2 to 0.1 milligram per liter. So I know you've seen this slide before. This is what our current draft permit looks like. We have limitations related to total phosphorus at 0.2 milligram per liter. We also have an ammonia nitrogen limit of 2 milligram per liter. And what we'd be doing as part of the settlement agreement, we would be asking for a minor amendment to these terms to incorporate a 6 milligram per liter total nitrogen requirement to the permit. That is a condition for both the two affected parties to withdraw their contested hearing request. So some of the benefits of this settlement agreement, obviously there's a benefit to avoiding costly litigation and being able to move quickly. And this does allow us to move into engineering design of the facility as quickly as we can, which we anticipate will go through an RFP process. And you know, we do have some time sensitivity here because Fort Worth on the west side is developing very fast, and we only have so much capacity in those existing collection lines. So we are needing to move quickly on this. Second bullet is that when you look at the plant design that we incorporated into the draft permit, we have the ability to meet these new requirements with the design that we had anticipated building anyway. So this 6 milligram per liter total nitrogen limit, this is where we wanted to really operate at it, regardless of whether it was in our permit or not. If we add the 0.1 milligram per liter total phosphorus limit, as far as the capital cost, there's not a large cost associated with that. There would be an operating cost associated with going from 0.2 to 0.1 milligram per liter related to the chemical addition that would be required. This plant really does position Fort Worth to be and provide reclaimed water to the fast developing west side. And as you know, one of the areas that has great potential for reclaimed water is an industrial corridor that that there's a lot of interest in. And if we can provide reclaimed water to them, that will be a great benefit to the customers in Fort Worth. And then, this is a benefit to both Fort Worth customers, but pretty much all of Tarrant Regional's customers, is that it provides a very low-cost indirect reuse project. So as far as next steps, the next step for us after the settlement agreement is approved, assuming it is approved, is to go out with an RFP for the design of the Marys Creek Water Reclamation Facility. You may recall that we've held back on doing any design until we receive a permit. We have, already started working on the actual lift station. We purchased the Walnut Creek lift station site already. Through a change order, we've already put in about 1,000 feet of that force main, and we're looking at trying to get easements and get the design moving on the lift station at force main. We will be submitting a reclaimed water authorization to TCEQ for the Marys Creek facility. We'll be looking at submitting both, we're looking for grant opportunities, but definitely submitting for a low interest loan from the Texas Water Development Board. And keep in mind that our application, we anticipate being ranked fairly high because the reclaimed water component of this plant is part of the state water plan. So design, we anticipate being about 2.5 years. I put down as fall 2022 to fall of 2024. And then the construction schedule, spring 2025 to probably summer of 2028. The previous speaker talked about amazing water features, which we think this is going to be an amazing water feature for our community. But they also mentioned supply chain issues and cost escalations. And this is something that's affecting, the entire construction industry. So, some of the decisions we'll have to make is that we have a 10 MGD plant that is ultimate capacity of 15 MGD, and how much provisions do we put into this initial design to expand the plant quickly? And we've been able to do that very successfully when we look at the West Side Water Treatment Plant. It was a membrane plant where we put in the concrete for a certain capacity that's more of the ultimate capacity, but we put in the equipment for the initial capacity. So we'll be looking at those kind of things when we get into the detailed design, and those will potentially affect costs. As I mentioned, the goal is to have the settlement agreement before you at the May 24th council meeting for action. With that, I'll take any questions.
Questions? Go ahead.
I'll jump in. First of all, thanks for that joke. That was really, really funny. And thank you for all the hard work. I know the litigation part was kind of challenging, but I'm glad we got to settlement. I mean, I just want to commend you on, thinking, of course, you're the expert at this, but thinking about costs that we can, or expenditures that we can make now that are really investments in scaling up the water treatment capacity of this plant. We say it all the time that we're 12th largest city in the country, and we're really growing really fast. And so being able to turn around a scaling project really quickly is really important. So thank you for that. I know there's costs associated with it, but I would be warm to that because time is of the essence when you talk about needing to add capacity to treatment plants. So thank you for all the hard work.
Yeah, and I'd just make one comment on that. You mentioned that I'm the expert. Well, I will tell you that, I worked with a great legal team, and our water quality consultant has been absolutely fabulous. And then I just also have to hand it to our own staff. Did great support throughout this whole process.
That's without a doubt one of the best teams in the world.
Any other questions? Nope. Great job, Chris. Thank you so much. Council, do we have any upcoming requests for future agenda items? Go ahead, Elizabeth.
I don't know. Chris has one, but I can't remember what it is for him, so I'll tell you what mine is. Recently in my district, there was a piece of property that someone was trying to purchase to develop. There was a city sewer line on that that was not recorded in any of the deeds. And so created a big detriment, impediment to development. And as Mayor Pro Tem tells us, the best thing we can do is to remove those. And so I would like to know if we do not have a process for remedying that, how we can create one, and if we do, what that is, because now we have a piece of property we don't get a taxable value on because of it.
Chris, did you have yours?
I'm just gonna contact staff and get it.
Okay.
It was about the grass and the violations. So I just contact them directly. Thank you.
Anybody else? Okay, with that, I think we're adjourned. Thanks, council.
Thank you.